Everyone in the Williams family was gathered in the hospital to be with Randall Williams, who had been poisoned. They all expected him to die, but a nurse came in and told them that he could be saved by a very dangerous type of blood transfusion. Seeing that everyone else was keeping silent, Kevin boldly asked, "How soon can you arrange for me to donate my blood?" "We have a couple of steps to go through first, sir. Before we do anything, we need to see if your blood types match," the nurse explained carefully. "If you'll all come with me, I can test everyone to see whose blood is compatible." As she finished speaking, most of the Williams family members were relieved to find out that they needed to match Randall's blood type. A couple of hours later, the family was even more excited. Grandpa Williams' blood type was AB negative, the rarest there is. "Out of 243 people, only 3 of you match Mr. Williams." The nurse was surprised when she looked at the results of everyone's testing. The hospital had hoped to have a larger pool of possible donors, but they were lucky to find even 3 people. One of the Williamses asked hesitantly, "Nurse, which 3 people matched?" "Kevin, Thomas, and Ethan Williams," she answered quietly. As soon as they heard who was eligible, many of the family members felt a lot less anxious, and Grandpa Williams, who had just woken up again, started to smile happily. Even though he had lived a long life, it was normal for him to want to live a little longer. "The next step is to discuss who will donate the blood. Then the hospital's specialists will begin the preparations for the procedure." The nurse turned and walked out of the room with the test results. Everyone turned and locked their eyes on Kevin, his uncle, and his cousin. Thomas sighed and patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Son, please donate your blood to your grandfather." Kevin was no longer considered a true member of the Williams family. Nobody expected him to come back and visit his grandfather in the hospital, let alone provide a blood transfusion. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Ethan looked at his father in shock. "I said you should give a blood transfusion to your grandfather," Thomas insisted as his heart sank. Just as Ethan was about to refuse, Grandpa Williams sat up a little in his bed and said, "No, I want Kevin to provide the transfusion for me." All of a sudden, everyone looked at the old man. Some of them had doubts in their eyes, while others immediately understood how he'd come to this decision. It was to help protect Thomas and Ethan. "Kevin, if anything happens to you, your wife will support you for the rest of your life. But your Uncle Thomas has just taken over as head of the family, and everyone is depending on him," Grandpa Williams explained. "As Thomas's only son, your cousin Ethan is next in line. The blood transfusion is not just dangerous, but could also affect his health. He's too young to take that kind of risk." Although Grandpa Williams was very weak, his mind was still strong. Nobody there could argue with his reasoning. Kevin was tempted to laugh. Ethan wasn't just a weak little boy. And so what if he was the only child in Thomas's family? If a blood transfusion like this was dangerous for Ethan, wouldn't it be just as risky for Kevin? Why was the Williams family ready to risk Kevin's life but not Ethan's? "Grandpa, do you really want to put them ahead of me?" Kevin was feeling a little resentment about his unreasonable suggestion. "Grandfather, you're right. I think I should be protected from harm, but Kevin is nothing to us. It doesn't matter what happens to him." Ethan was grateful that Kevin would take this enormous risk and not him. The other family members who were in the room echoed Ethan's opinion. One of them commented, "Yes, Kevin's blood would be better off in Grandpa's body. It would be payment for all the years the family supported him." Another one remarked, "I wish I could offer my blood to Grandpa, but unfortunately I don't have the right type." You could hear them all chattering up and down the hall. Kevin started to sneer as he looked around the room at all of his relatives, who were literally demanding his blood. "Kevin!" Of course, Thomas understood what his father was asking them to do. If you'd asked him the day before, he probably would have agreed. But now that he knew what Laura had done, he felt incredibly guilty and was concerned about his nephew. But he had to keep what his wife had done a secret from the rest of the family. There was no turning back now. "Kevin, did you hear that? The decision is unanimous, but don't worry. After you donate your blood to your grandfather, we'll give you some money for your troubles. You get to do the right thing and also profit from it. Wouldn't that be a nice change?" Laura sneered as she spoke to Kevin. Don't you think I can tell when I'm being manipulated? Kevin grumbled. I'll do the transfusion, but not because you're ordering me to. I've been cut off from the family for too long to care what you think. I'm doing this for my grandfather to repay his kindness to me over the years. The whole room suddenly quieted down, and no one said a word to refute what Kevin had said. Thank you, Kevin. You don't know how happy this makes me. If the operation is successful and you and I are still alive, let's put the past behind us. You can even bring your parents back to the mansion, Grandpa Williams said excitedly. Blood is thicker than water. Suddenly, Dalton Steele pushed his way through the crowd. The big burly man was seething in anger. Dalton, what are you doing in New York? Kevin asked in surprise. Never mind that. Just come with me. Dalton snarled as he looked around at Kevin's relatives. None of the Williamses said a word. They avoided making any eye contact with Dalton. After all, they'd just seen how ferocious Dalton could be when he came to the family mansion. Dalton, this is none of your business. What are you doing here? Laura asked him angrily. She was afraid that if Kevin left, her son would have to offer to do the transfusion for Randall. She didn't care how dangerous Dalton was. She was trying to protect her son. We haven't forgotten the trouble you caused for us, and we're not afraid of the Steele family. Really? Not afraid of my family? Dalton looked at Laura with disdain. If you think you're strong enough, why don't you come to Chicago and see how that turns out for you? Calm down, Dalton. Kevin knew just how bad his friend's temper could be. Are you nuts, Kevin? Have you already forgotten what they did to you? Dalton roared loudly. I know the Williams family can be vicious, but I can't forget their kindness to me when I was younger. They raised me until I was 20, Kevin explained to Dalton. But he also knew that nobody in the room was as good as his buddy. Then some of Kevin's relatives got over their fear and started to argue with Dalton. You're screwing everything up. Kevin's willing to offer a blood transfusion to his grandfather. What gives you the right to stand in the way? Another one yelled, We just want him to donate some blood, not kill him. Then Ethan walked over to Dalton and sneered. Just because you're important in Chicago, that doesn't mean anything here. Nobody wants your opinion. Besides, if Kevin helps Grandpa, what's it to you? Even if the procedure injures him, he's unimportant. I'm sorry, but he can just go back to living off his in-laws. Who the hell are you? Nobody talks to me like that. Dalton grabbed Ethan by the shoulders and pulled him forward towards him. He then kicked him hard in the crotch. The intense pain made Ethan's whole face turn pale. He looked like he was going to puke. Then Dalton grabbed Ethan by the neck and slapped him in the face. The whole room was silent, but nobody stepped forward to interfere. How dare you hit me? Ethan gnashed his teeth and glared at Dalton. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. He'd never been treated this way in his entire life, and now there were so many people watching. What would they think of him? I'm gonna beat the crap out of you, Dalton said viciously. Mr. Steele, aren't you going too far? Thomas was on the verge of tears as he pleaded with Dalton. He felt helpless against this powerful man. Are you Kevin's uncle? So you're the head of the Williams family now, Dalton shouted ferociously. Listen to me carefully. As long as I'm alive, none of you will ever bully Kevin again. Don't forget that you're the ones who drove him out of your family, and now you're actually forcing him to give you his blood. Hey, who put you in charge? Laura snarled at him menacingly. If you want Kevin, you'll have to get him over my dead body, Dalton retorted. Come on, everyone, Laura roared loudly. Let's show this guy what happens to someone who sticks his nose in our family's business. They all jumped up, ready to fight. Now that they'd been training with the Myriads, a lot of them had gotten a lot stronger and more skilled. We'll see about that. Dalton punched the wall. His fists were like hammers, and the entire room shook from the force of the blows. The Williamses all gasped in terror. They could clearly see 2 large dents in the masonry wall. No one doubted that if Dalton had punched harder, he would have broken through into the next room. Who isn't afraid to die? Come and get me. Dalton shouted so loudly that everyone near him took a step back, cowering in fear. I've never seen Dalton like this. Kevin was surprised at his friend's power. What he didn't know is that ever since Dalton took the power pill, his training had improved by leaps and bounds. He was already impressive before, and now his strength was absolutely overwhelming. None of Kevin's relatives was able to respond. They stood there with their mouths hanging open, unable to move. Don't be so arrogant, Dalton. Do you really think we're all that weak? Grandpa Williams sneered. Even though he was very weak from the poison, Grandpa Williams found the strength to challenge Dalton. Just because the Steele family has a huge influence in Chicago, don't think that you can come to New York and meddle in our family's affairs. If you mess with us, it'll end badly for you. From what I understand, the procedures could harm Thomas or Ethan. But did you give any thought to Kevin's feelings? Dalton sneered. Why don't you let your children and grandchildren learn how to lead by example? I can't believe you're making such a dumbass decision. If this is the best you can do, Kevin would be a lot better off without you. You! Grandpa Williams was so angry his body was shaking. Thomas quickly went to the bed and patted him on the shoulder to try and calm him down. Look what you've done now, Kevin. Did you bring your friend here just to upset your grandfather? Laura scolded him. Do you really want to make him angry? I think you should apologize to Grandpa right now. Why don't you apologize? Dalton shouted back. Suddenly they all heard someone burst into the room and shout, How dare you make trouble for the family again? Kevin was shocked to hear this, and he could feel the energy of the woman who was standing in the doorway. She stared expressionlessly at Kevin. It was Ariana Titus, the woman who had attacked Kevin at the Herbalist Society contest. She'd been busy teaching her students when she heard that Kevin had arrived in Grandpa Williams' room at the hospital. She rushed right over, expecting trouble. When Ariana saw how upset Grandpa Williams was, she scowled at Kevin. You scumbag! Have you come here to threaten your grandfather? Who is this woman? Dalton had no idea who she was, but he could feel that she was very different from ordinary people. Kevin's relatives were relieved to see Ariana arrive. They expected her to finish Kevin and Dalton off without a problem with all her fighting skills. Kevin's uncle and a few of his other family members stepped between Kevin and Grandpa Williams. Kevin frowned. He didn't understand why Ariana was still so angry with him. Dalton squinted at Kevin's relatives and then at Ariana. In spite of his progress, he wasn't really looking forward to fighting with her. Both sides stared at each other, wondering who would make the first move. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Let's do it, Dalton! Kevin raced forward like a shot. He and Ariana collided in an explosion of energy. Everyone stepped back to avoid being drawn into their fight. But Ariana drew first blood and Kevin staggered back with blood flowing from his nose and mouth. Uncle Thomas did his best to stay between them and Grandpa Williams in a feeble attempt to shield him with his body. As the fight grew more intense, Laura laughed wildly. Even if Kevin wanted to run, he couldn't get away. She was sure that he'd end up defeated, and his blood would be able to help save Grandpa Williams. Are you okay, Kevin? Dalton ran over to him, obviously distressed. Never mind me. Kevin wiped the blood from his face and pulled his night dagger out of his jacket. You're a disgrace, Ariana shouted. But Kevin was more concerned with stopping her attack than exchanging insults. Just when Dalton was about to fight with the Williamses in Grandpa's hospital room, they were all interrupted by Ariana Titus. She burst into the room and confronted Kevin in a mad rage. Kevin was overwhelmed by her display of energy, and because she was much more skilled than he was. He was sure that he and Dalton couldn't beat her, even if they joined forces. She's pretty good, isn't she? Dalton remarked casually to Kevin. Watch your tongue, Ariana sneered. Kill us if you can, but if you fail, you'll regret coming here. Dalton's whole body was tense, and he knew that this woman was the most skilled opponent he'd ever faced. I'm not afraid of death. Let's see if you're ready to meet your maker. She moved like lightning and struck Dalton's chest with her palm, right over his heart. It was the kind of punch that could give you a heart attack. Dalton staggered backward and struggled to catch his breath. "Dalton!" Kevin screamed in fright. Ariana had hit Dalton's chest so solidly that blood began to gush out of his mouth and nose. He felt himself losing consciousness and dropped to the floor. The Williamses all smiled when they saw this. They were happy to see Ariana cut Dalton down to size. He and Kevin were sure to die. "Damn you!" In a rage, Kevin drew his night dagger and pounced on Ariana. He didn't care what happened to him. He moved so fast that you could hear the rush of air as he sprang toward her. Everyone was amazed because none of them thought that he could move that quickly. But Ariana was a little quicker, and she deflected Kevin's strike. Kevin ignored her and turned away to check on Dalton. "How are you, friend? Are you okay?" Kevin asked in a panic.
"You should get out of here, Kevin. I may never get to see Chicago again. Promise me you'll take care of Miranda for me."
As Dalton spoke, blood was pouring out of his mouth. His face was getting pale and his voice had gotten weak. Barely a whisper. "No, Dalton, you've got to hold on. I've got a way to save you." By now, Kevin was very anxious and his eyes were filled with tears. "Before you save your friend, you should figure out how to save yourself." Ariana stabbed Kevin with her dagger. She was so close and so quick that he couldn't avoid it. The Williams family was certain that they were witnessing Kevin's death. They couldn't help getting excited. "What's going on?" Ariana looked at Kevin in disbelief. She knew that she hadn't missed him, but after piercing his shirt, the dagger couldn't go any further. Kevin looked down at his heart and saw that the blade had been unable to reach his skin. The Alliance leader's gift had saved his life. All of a sudden, Kevin exhaled deeply and took several steps back. Everyone was shocked at this turn of events. The blade that Ariana had just used was sharp enough to kill anyone, no matter how much they had been training and developing their body. But she had no idea that Kevin was wearing protective clothing. His ballistic shirt had not only absorbed all the energy, but reflected it back at her as she stabbed Kevin. "What kind of trick is this, you dirtbag?" Ariana's eyes flashed with anger. She knew that Kevin couldn't stop a blade himself, but had to have something helping to protect him. "Let's go, Dalton." Kevin tried to rouse his friend so they could get away. "Where do you think you're going?" Because of her rage, Ariana wouldn't let them off so easily. How could she let Kevin take his friend and go? Not when she was so close to winning. But then someone else came into the room. Thomas and the others could feel his power, his dignified air. "What are you doing, bullying these young men? Don't you have any integrity?" The man's booming voice filled the room. Before anyone could react, the man moved gracefully to the middle of the room. He stood there calmly and faced Ariana and the others. "Who are you?" Ariana looked him up and down but wasn't sure what to make of him. She could tell that he was very advanced but knew nothing else about him. That meant she had to be extra careful, no matter how strong and skilled she was. "Sir, what are you doing here?" Kevin exclaimed excitedly. He was surprised to see the Night King. Kevin's relatives were shocked to see this. They didn't expect him to have such a powerful defender. "Don't worry, Kevin. Your friend will be just fine." The Night King walked over to Dalton and bent over him. "What arrogance! How dare you interfere?" Ariana moved toward the Night King to keep him from helping Dalton. "And what ignorance!" The Night King retorted as he made just a slight move and threw Ariana against the door. Then he left Dalton for a moment and punched his fist through the wall next to the window. The sun came shining in through the hole and the entire room was silent. Some people even forgot to breathe. Ariana was frozen in shock. In all of her years of training, she'd never seen anyone like him. "You mess with the bull, you get the horns," the Night King commented as he returned to checking on Dalton's injury. "Who are you?" She stared at the Night King, unsure what to do next. "I'm Kevin's mentor. You don't deserve to know my name." The Night King slowly turned around and looked at Ariana before he continued. "Now tell me, can you protect these two men?" There were dozens of people crowded into the room and listening from the hallway, and none of them dared to speak, let alone argue with the Night King. Nobody was willing to risk his neck after seeing what the Night King had done to their champion Ariana. Then the Night King suddenly put his hand on Kevin's chest. He moved so quickly out of the room that he was just a blur. It was surreal because he wasn't running. He just slipped past all of them before anyone could react. And he took Kevin and Dalton with him. After he left, everyone started to snap out of it, and the feeling in the room was different, maybe a little lighter. But Ariana was deathly afraid of what she had just witnessed. This was on another level from anything she'd seen in all her years of training and improving her body with herbal meds. The Night King was like no other human she'd ever met. I didn't expect Kevin to have someone so powerful training him, Ariana thought to herself. Then she quickly went over to the bed and spoke sincerely to Grandpa. Mr. Williams, I'm sorry, but I may have to leave you and your family for a while. Please take care of my students. Where are you going? Laura immediately asked. She could see how powerful Kevin's mentor was, and she knew that Dalton was probably going to recover. If Kevin decided to take revenge, he'd have a powerful ally. But if he were still part of the Williams family, maybe that wouldn't happen. Ariana didn't consider the Night King to be an enemy, but if anything happened, she would have the support of her organization, the Union, and they would protect the Williams family. I'm going to return to my people and report this to them, but she was only telling them half the story. What she didn't tell the Williams family was that she was starting to have some suspicions. Seeing someone that impressive in a public place like this could be a sign that there was something bigger going on, and she wanted to find out what it was. She walked out of the room without waiting for Randall to reply. A nurse who had heard all the commotion ran into the room. When she saw the mess and the hole in the wall, she was stunned. What's going on here? Are you visitors or a demolition crew? The nurse was very upset by their behavior. I'm sorry, nurse. Our family will compensate you for any damages. Thomas took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. The nurse was more concerned about Grandpa Williams, though. Repairing the room wasn't in her job description. She looked Thomas in the eye and reminded him, We need to know who's been chosen to provide the blood transfusion. Our specialists have informed me that it must be done no later than tomorrow. You can rest assured that we've made our decision. Please, make the necessary arrangements for my father. Thomas sighed as he looked over at his father lying helplessly in the hospital bed. Laura tried to speak, but she just couldn't find the words. Now that Kevin had been taken away, Thomas and Ethan were the only ones left who could provide a transfusion for Grandpa Williams. But she didn't object because she was trying to keep a low profile. Ethan looked incredibly depressed. He knew that he couldn't run away from this, but he also wasn't sure if he would survive the procedure. This wasn't even a regular blood transfusion. From what the nurse had explained, it would be an incredible stress on his body, with possible long-term effects. As he lay there on the bed, Grandpa Williams was very conflicted. He knew that he should be furious at Dalton for his interference, but when he saw Kevin's mentor defeat Ariana so effortlessly, he regretted his behavior. If I'd known that there was such a strong man behind Kevin, I'd have kept him in the Williams family, no matter what he did, Grandpa thought to himself. The Night King had such absolute strength that they couldn't resist him. Did the Williams family have any hope at all? Grandpa Williams was sure that the relationship between his family and Kevin was damaged beyond repair. No matter how much he regretted his behavior, he didn't see a way out. In Dalton's mansion, the Night King was bent over his patient. Kevin and the rest of the Steele family stood outside the door, unable to see exactly what the Night King was doing. Miranda's eyes were red and swollen from all of her crying. She'd been crying for nearly 3 hours, ever since Kevin had appeared in their home with his injured friend. But before they could find out just what had happened, they saw Dalton lying there, with his life hanging by a thread. Then the Night King asked for an empty room and took Dalton in for treatment. Kevin kept pacing the floor. He was anxious, but he knew that Dalton was better off there being treated by the Night King than at the hospital itself. He knew that Miranda and Dalton's grandfather Norman didn't blame him, but he still felt guilty about the whole situation. If it wasn't for him, Dalton wouldn't have had a quarrel with the Williams family at all, and he wouldn't be lying there fighting for his life. Kevin, listen to me. If my cousin has any problems, we will never forgive you for it, Rain said to him coldly. Yes, that's right. You're nothing but trouble. Dalton's had nothing but problems ever since he met you. I think you're a jinx. Blanca growled at Kevin. Because of you, the Jones family is on the verge of bankruptcy. Your wife was seriously injured not long ago, and my cousin was almost permanently disabled thanks to you. And now he's half dead. If my cousin can't be saved, I'll make sure they bury you with him. Rain was seething with anger. Kevin leaned back against the wall, lowered his head, and said nothing. It was because of him that Dalton had been injured. No matter how harsh Rain and Blanca were being toward him, he didn't disagree, and he let them keep venting their frustration. That's enough, you two. Shut up. Norman Steele glared glumly at the two sisters. Grandpa, why are you still protecting this loser? Rain asked in surprise. If it wasn't for the bad luck Kevin's brought us, my cousin wouldn't be like this. I have no idea how he can be saved, Blanca said as her voice got choked up. Grandpa, why don't we just take him to the hospital? That man who's in the room with Dalton is already delayed getting medical treatment. I told you both to shut up. Didn't you hear me? Norman interrupted Blanca before she could finish her tirade. What's the use of going to the hospital? Can any of those quacks be as skilled as the man who's working on Dalton right now? Norman growled bitterly. In his opinion, since Kevin had called the Night King, it was certain that he was no amateur and he would surely be able to save his grandson. Miranda stood silently at the door, looking absolutely despondent. Everyone could feel that she was on the verge of a collapse. Suddenly, the Night King opened the door and walked out. Several people hurriedly gathered around him to inquire about the situation. The blow was extremely powerful and very precise. It bruised Dalton's heart. If Kevin hadn't started to apply first aid at the risk of being attacked himself, the young man would have certainly died. The Night King could tell that the family was already exhausted, so he explained what he'd done so they could be reassured. I gave him some medication that will help his heart. He's already responding very well. Fortunately, he was in excellent shape to begin with, especially since he'd recently taken the restoration pill. His life is no longer in danger, but he needs one more thing if he's going to completely recover. What is it? I'll find it right away. Kevin immediately offered his help. The Night King's explanation had definitely given them hope and eased their anxiety. Miranda was finally breathing normally now. I like your positive attitude, but it's not going to be as easy as you think. The Night King looked Kevin in the eyes with a very solemn expression. Norman Steele was resolved to help his grandson. No matter how hard it is to find, even if it drives us to exhaustion, my family will find it and get it for you. I need a rare plant that has been infused with gold, the Night King announced to them. Great! Where in the world were they going to find that? The Night King had brought Dalton back from the brink of death, but he still required something to help him fully recover. The Steeles and Kevin promised to do everything in their power to find whatever the Night King needed. The legendary gemstone made by combining gold and water? Kevin asked in shock. Not bad. I see you found some time to study. The Night King nodded his head a few times and then continued his explanation. Normally, gold and water can't mix, but a process was discovered to create a gemstone that contains gold that's been blended with water. The result is similar to aqua aura, but far more rare and valuable, and we have ways to use it for healing. Kevin had been hopeful for Dalton's full recovery until he heard the last part. The gold and water gemstone is the rarest of the rare, and you could never expect to see a sample in your entire lifetime. How on earth was Kevin going to find any so he could help his friend? I seem to remember seeing some, Norman Steele suddenly exclaimed. About 15 years ago, there was a small piece of it at the Pearl family's auction house. As I recall, it was sold to the Sutherland family for close to $600 million. Are you sure that the Sutherlands bought it? Kevin's eyes lit up as he felt a glimmer of hope. No matter how much it might cost, at least they now had a lead to follow. This would no longer be like looking for a needle in a haystack. The bidding was fierce because several uber-rich families wanted to get their hands on it. Norman seemed lost in thought as he tried to remember the details. Then he added anxiously, "But the Sutherlands don't socialize with families like ours. We're not aristocratic enough for them. If I went to their mansion, they probably wouldn't even let me get past the front gate, let alone give us the gold water gem." "I'll go there. I know Penny. She's the oldest daughter in the family," Kevin said confidently. "Don't worry, Mr. Steele. I'll bring it back here." "How can a loser like you know someone like Penny Sutherland?" Rain said in disbelief. "Well, I think he's just trying to find a way to slip out of here." Blanca looked at Kevin with disdain. "Penny's completely out of your league. Why would she waste her time being friends with a scumbag like you?" "Rain, Blanca, you two should really talk less," Norman said angrily. In fact, Mr. Steele didn't blame Kevin at all for what had happened to Dalton. He knew that his grandson had chosen to risk his life for Kevin and that sometimes things don't go your way in life. And that's exactly the kind of man he'd raised his grandson to be. Kevin ignored Dalton's cousins. They were always complaining about something. Then he spoke to his mentor. "Sir, I'm going to go see Penny Sutherland. If Dalton asks, I'm getting him some help." "Don't worry about me," the Night King thought for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a beautifully crafted pendant in the form of an infinity sign. It was made of palladium, one of the rarest metals. Everyone was astonished to see it. They could immediately tell that it was an extraordinary piece of jewelry. "You have to take this pendant with you when you go there. If anyone in the Sutherland family gives you any trouble at all, just show them this infinity pendant, and all your problems will be solved." The Night King spoke very seriously as he put the jewelry into Kevin's hand. "Thank you, sir." Kevin didn't ask any more questions. He knew that the Night King had a lot of secrets, but he wasn't ready to talk about them yet. As soon as Kevin stepped outside, he called Penny's number. But she didn't answer, and Kevin got more and more frustrated as he tried over and over to connect with her. Finally, on the 6th try, he was connected. Penny didn't even wait for Kevin to speak, and she snapped at him impatiently. "Kevin, are you sick or something? Why are you calling me?" He understood right away that Penny was angry about the medication he was supposed to make for Mackenzie. "I'm sorry, Penny, but I have to ask you for help with something. Where are you right now?" "Why should I tell you?" Penny replied coldly. "Please, do me this one favor. And I do have the repair pill for your friend," Kevin said anxiously. "Just tell me where you are and I'll get it to you now." "I'm at Brenda's beauty salon," Penny said tersely, and then she abruptly hung up. Suddenly, Mackenzie Knott reached out and put her arm around Penny's waist. "And who were you talking to?" "I think Penny has a little secret. Could it have been her future husband?" Brenda stared at her friend with a mischievous look in her eyes. "Wow, Penny, since when do you have a boyfriend? Why haven't I heard about him before?" one of the other women asked her. "Tell us everything about him. Don't hide anything from us. We promised to be nice to him." One of her other friends was begging her to give them some details. The women were all sitting around on the plush sofas, smiling as they teased their friend. It was quite a scene. They were sitting in a luxurious beauty salon that Brenda had recently bought. It looked like a legitimate business, but it was just a place for the friends to hang out, and it was never open to the general public. There isn't much to say. It was just Kevin calling. Penny didn't sound very angry, but when she saw her friend's expressions change, she couldn't help thinking about the handsome, naive-looking guy who had her so mixed up. "What? Penny, why did you even answer the phone of that liar? What the heck did he want?" You could see the anger in Mackenzie's eyes. It was bad enough that Kevin had seen Mackenzie undressing on Penny's video call, but then he went on to cheat her instead of making the herbal meds he'd promised. After Kevin had disappeared from Penny's basement, she discovered that a lot of most of the precious medicinal ingredients in the lab were missing. Luckily, she'd taken a look around when the construction workers were repairing the hole in her basement wall. Because of that, everyone believed that Kevin had only claimed to be an herbalist so that he could get access to her basement and steal the materials.
They figured he made the hole in the wall so he could sneak out before being exposed as a fraud.
Mackenzie, I really don't think we should call him a liar. As a matter of fact, Kevin just told me that he's made the repair pill he promised, and he's bringing it over right now.
Although Penny's tone was very matter-of-fact, her expression showed that she still had some doubts.
What?
Her friends all replied in unison. They couldn't believe it was true.
Don't believe a word that liar says, Penny. I think he just told you so that he could get near you and pull some other crap on you,
Mackenzie advised her stubbornly.
From everything I've read, the repair pill is one of the lost prescriptions that had disappeared along with most of the apothecaries. Even if someone got a hold of the recipe, it would take a skilled herbalist to make one.
Mackenzie tried to remain calm, but she didn't want Penny to be tricked by Kevin again. But just in case Kevin really was a master at herbalism, they had to be careful not to be rude to him. In fact, they still didn't know exactly why he disappeared that night. Was he really worth the loss of so many valuable medicinal ingredients? But if he turned out to be a master herbalist, he was worth any price he asked. When Brenda thought about it, she suddenly got very serious. Penny, do you know how long it'll take Kevin to get here?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it'll take him too long.
Penny wasn't in the mood to argue with her friends. As far as Penny was concerned, Kevin just couldn't be trusted. First, he broke his dinner date with her. Then he destroyed her basement and snuck off with some pretty pricey herbal ingredients. On the other hand, it was really hard to find a good herbalist, let alone a great one. Penny tried to imagine what it would be like to have an herbalist in her family.
If only we could get Kevin into the family,
Penny thought to herself.
I don't ever want to see that loser again. If he dares to come here, I'll take care of him.
Mackenzie clenched her fists tightly.
Geez, Mackenzie, do you have something against Kevin?
One of the other women burst out laughing at her friend's reaction to him.
I've got good reason to be pissed at him.
When Mackenzie said this, she was thinking about how Kevin had seen her in her underwear on Penny's phone. While they were all arguing about Kevin, the door opened and he rushed in. He was stunned by the sight of a dozen beautiful women lounging around. He'd expected to walk into a real beauty salon, but this looked more like a nightclub. He felt a little outnumbered and stood there awkwardly.
Oh, hi, handsome. Back so soon? Did you miss your sweetie?
Brenda walked toward Kevin seductively, getting a kick out of making him feel a little uncomfortable. I just couldn't stay away. How are you doing, beautiful? Kevin did his best to be playful too, even though he had more important things on his mind.
Oh, you don't seem so shy this time.
Brenda leaned in and blew in Kevin's ear. Listen, Angel, I really need to talk with Penny. Kevin gently stepped away and started to walk toward Penny. A second later, a glass of white wine was thrown in Kevin's face. Everyone turned and stared at Mackenzie.
You have some nerve coming here, you liar!
Mackenzie smashed her glass on the floor. What are you doing, Mackenzie? Kevin was taken by surprise.
What are you talking about? I can pour a glass of wine, can't I? She sneered. You know, yesterday I sent someone to check into your background. That's how I found out you were tossed out of your own family, and ever since you've been mooching off the Jones family. You're the biggest loser in Chicago.
When the other woman in the salon heard what Mackenzie had found out, they burst into laughter. Well, most of the women who were sitting on the sofas were amused, but a couple of them weren't laughing at all.
Doesn't that bother you, Penny?
One of the women asked her. They started to mock Kevin and ask him why he was so interested in Penny. By now, none of them believed that Kevin was really an herbalist. They figured he'd be lucky to train his body a little, let alone have such a specialized skill. After all, whoever heard of an herbalist who was short on cash? They're usually so rich they toss money around like it's confetti. Kevin frowned, but he didn't say anything more. He was there to ask for help. He would just have to put up with their humiliation if he wanted to help Dalton to recover.
What am I?
Mackenzie put her hands on her hips and glared at Kevin. I don't have the time for this. Kevin wiped the wine off his face and walked over to Penny. Can I talk with you about something?
Oh,
Were you talking to me? Penny interrupted Kevin as she casually sipped her sparkling wine. Didn't you claim that you can refine all kinds of herbal meds? All I've seen is a giant hole in my wall. Let me explain that, Penny. Kevin didn't know what to say for a moment. That night, he'd been knocked unconscious by the person who'd been sent by Selena, the Alliance director. When he woke up again, he was at the Alliance's headquarters. He had no idea what happened during that time. There's nothing to explain. Just get lost. Penny gestured impatiently for him to go away. Did you hear what Penny said? Just get out of here or you're dead meat. Mackenzie was so angry she could barely catch her breath. Please, listen to me, Penny. My friend is dying. He urgently needs a gold and water gemstone to save his life. I don't care how much money you want for it, Kevin pleaded with her. Every minute that he delayed, Dalton was in more danger. Suddenly, all the women looked over at Penny. They knew that the Sutherlands had taken the raw material and hired a craftsman to create a bracelet for Penny. Do you know what you're talking about? That's an extremely rare treasure, Mackenzie scolded Kevin. Mackenzie's right. I think you should give up on the idea. It's Penny's favorite piece of jewelry, and she hasn't taken it off in years. Brenda put one hand on Kevin's shoulder and patted his cheek with the other. Let's get serious. Penny knitted her brow as she thought about Kevin's request. Then she looked at him again. Do you know how much my family paid for it? I know it cost $600 million. I'll go to the bank to transfer the money to you right away, Kevin answered quickly. Things were going really well at Williams Media. Plus, the new hotel was doing great, and on top of that, Cook and Tyler would certainly back him. $600 million was just a drop in the bucket. Penny's friend stopped laughing. Do you have any idea how much $600 million is? Brenda asked. I know you're upset with me, but I really had an emergency that night. Look, I have the repair pill right here. Kevin held out his hand and showed it to her. They all stared in disbelief. Penny gazed at the repair pill and then looked at Kevin, then back at the medicine. She was sure it was the real thing, but her friends thought it was just a trick. How could Kevin prove that it was genuine? Penny's friends wanted Kevin to leave, especially Mackenzie. In order to show how sincere he was, Kevin showed them the repair pill that he'd made for Mackenzie. You've got to listen to us. Penny, don't let this trash cheat you again. Nobody actually knows what the repair pill looks like. This could just be a freaking piece of candy. She didn't trust Kevin at all. As he was listening to everyone badmouth him, he started to hyperventilate. How could they be so foolish when they had no idea what they were talking about? Let's listen to what he has to say. Penny looked Kevin directly in the eye and asked him, Is it true that your friend's life is on the line? Yes, it's true. Dalton was injured by an expert from the union. He's lying at home right now. If you don't believe me, I can take you over to the Steele family's mansion. Kevin anxiously shuffled his feet. Not right now. I ended up having the day off from school, and I want to hang around a little more with my sisters. I believe you, and I'll let you have the golden water gem, but you have to remember one thing. You owe me a favor now. A huge favor. Penny slowly took off her bracelet. She understood how Kevin felt about Dalton, and she would never joke around about something as serious as this. This bracelet contains the gold water stone? Kevin asked in surprise. Yes, but I want to remind you that although this is rare and valuable, it's extraordinarily durable. If my family hadn't known what to do with it, I'm afraid it wouldn't be here today, Penny remarked as she held it out for Kevin. But before Kevin could take it from her hand, Mackenzie reached out and snatched it away. Mackenzie, what are you doing? Penny was surprised at her friend. Penny, don't worry about it. I want to teach Kevin a lesson. Mackenzie held the bracelet out of Kevin's reach and said, Give me the pill first. Don't you believe this is a real repair pill? The frustration was showing on Kevin's face. He wanted to deck Mackenzie, but that wouldn't be right either. I just don't believe you. What's the matter with that? Mackenzie replied coldly. Give me the repair pill and I'll send someone to see whether this is a genuine med before I give you the bracelet. No way. As far as Kevin was concerned, this wasn't even an option, so he refused and pulled back his hand. Dalton was still unconscious. Was there enough time for Mackenzie to have the pill verified? What if she left and didn't come back? Kevin, you know that Penny can be a little gullible. Believe it or not, I'm ready to destroy the bracelet right now. Mackenzie's eyes were burning with anger. Don't be impulsive, Mackenzie. Penny tried to calm her friend down. Penny knew how bad her temper could be, and she was used to having to calm her down. Mackenzie, you may not realize it, but the bracelet's material is virtually indestructible. There's no way you could destroy it. Kevin hated to be threatened, and he did his best to control his tone of voice. Just give me the bracelet, and I promise I'll give you the repair pill. He'd had enough of this standoff. Well, even if it can't be destroyed, how do you know I won't run down to the beach and toss it in Lake Michigan? Or maybe I'll just leave Chicago and you'll never see it again. Mackenzie persisted. There was no way she was going to let Kevin win. Please don't mess around, Mackenzie. Kevin was so frustrated he was going nuts. Penny looked over at Brenda, but her friend didn't understand what Mackenzie was about to do. But Penny knew that Mackenzie could be very stubborn and incredibly unreasonable. Well, why should I give the bracelet to you? Remember when you said I'd have to beg you for the repair pill? Mackenzie got a really snotty look on her face and said, I'll tell you what, you're going to have to beg me. What did you say? Kevin clenched his fists and took a deep breath. He was really about to lose his mind. Mackenzie, you're going too far. Brenda couldn't believe what she was doing. Penny was getting upset with her friend too. For one thing, if Kevin really is a master herbalist, he may get revenge on her in the future. And not even Mackenzie's grandfather would be able to help her. Well, are you going to do it or not? If you don't beg me right now, I'm heading for the door, Mackenzie said with a sneer. Mackenzie, you have to stop this. I need that bracelet. Kevin's face was almost purple with rage. What's the matter with you? Can't you take a little teasing? Mackenzie stuck her tongue out at Kevin like they were a couple of school kids on the playground. Suddenly, Kevin pulled out the infinity pendant that the Night King had given him and announced, If you're not willing to help, maybe this can convince you. Penny and the others looked at him with some doubt in their eyes. They all knew enough to see that it was a very high-quality piece of jewelry, probably made by a master jeweler. But what was it for? But Mackenzie was the one who was the most shocked. Her face turned pale and she took a few steps back. Her eyes grew wide and she seemed a little afraid. The other women didn't know the meaning of the pendant. Did she? The Myriads had a strict hierarchy. Of course, there was a leader in the highest position. There were also deputies, messengers, and other people in respected positions. It was similar to the structure in the Alliance. Mackenzie's grandfather was one of the 12 messengers, and the infinity pendant Kevin took out was the symbol of the deputy leader. I can't believe you're the deputy leader. Mackenzie suddenly got very polite and looked down at the floor. Anyone who belonged to the Myriads knew that you had to be very respectful toward anyone who was in possession of the symbol that Kevin was showing them. Penny and the others were shocked. They all got up from the sofa and stood there quietly. They didn't even dare to breathe. All of them were obviously members of the Myriads. Now Mackenzie was petrified because of all the trouble she'd given Kevin in the past. She could feel the blood run out of her face and she felt a little dizzy. But Kevin also felt a little puzzled by this. Wasn't the Night King a member of the Alliance? How did he also become the deputy leader of the Myriads? On top of that, he clearly remembered that Brett Stewart had told him that the symbol of the Myriads deputy was made of platinum. But Kevin knew jewelry, and he was certain that this one was made of palladium. He wasn't sure if he'd misunderstood what Stewart had told him. But the symbol was the same as the one on his ID card for Infinitude Pharmaceuticals, the business the Myriads used as a front. It seems that my mentor has a lot of secrets. I'm going to have a long talk with him the next time I see him, Kevin said to himself. I'm sorry I insulted you, Deputy. I had no idea who you were. Please, forgive me.
I promise I'll never do it again." Mackenzie was sure to be extremely polite and sweet now. Kevin hadn't said anything to them, so the women didn't know what to do. They were part of the elite of Chicago, but in the Myriads they hardly had any rank at all. Whether Kevin was a member of the Myriads or not, the only thing that mattered was he was showing them the symbol of a rank that was much higher than theirs. "Now can you give me the bracelet?" Kevin asked her flatly. Mackenzie walked over to Kevin and calmly handed him the bracelet that he needed. He didn't want to waste another second. He took the bracelet and practically ran out of the shop. When Kevin was gone, Mackenzie took a long, deep breath. Penny and her other friends stood there in silence. Wasn't Kevin just a freeloader? How did he get to be such a high rank in the Myriads? "Mackenzie, are you sure he had the infinity pendant?" Penny asked her hesitantly. "I'm sure. I'm not mistaken. I've seen that same symbol on all the Myriads' high-level buildings. But my grandfather once told me that there's one exception." Mackenzie explained as fear started to creep over her. "You mean the man nobody's seen for decades?" Brenda asked in shock. Her father also had a high rank in the organization, so she knew a little about these things. When Kevin returned to the Steele family's home, the Night King quickly took the bracelet so he could use it to cure Dalton's injuries. More than 2 hours later, the Night King finally came into the great room and told Kevin that Dalton would be okay. But he had some business to attend to, so he had to get going. "I knew I could count on you to help Dalton," Norman Steele said with a sigh. He knew that it would be tough to deal with the Sutherland family, so he figured Kevin had paid a colossal sum for the Golden Water gemstone. "Grandpa, how can you say a thing like that? My cousin was injured because of this piece of trash. I don't see how this can make up for it." Rain looked at Kevin with utter disdain. The more she looked at him, the more contemptuous she felt. Kevin didn't pay any attention to Rain and turned to Norman. "I wouldn't do anything less. As far as I'm concerned, Dalton's my brother." "Kevin, our home is your home. Stay with us for as long as you like." Norman was very happy to have Kevin staying with them. Now, it was a waiting game. They had no idea when Dalton would finally open his eyes again. By 1 in the morning, Rain and Blanca were starting to worry about staying up all night. They were exhausted and asked their grandfather if they could go to their rooms and get some rest. Norman had a strong constitution, but he was getting on in years. By 3 in the morning, he needed to go get some rest too. "Miranda, if you also want to get some sleep, I'll stay here and let you know when Dalton wakes up," Kevin said softly. "Well, thank you so much," Miranda sighed. To tell the truth, she didn't really believe that Kevin's mentor would be able to save her husband. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Kevin was starting to get irritable. He kept thinking about what had happened in the hospital. He stepped out for just a minute to get some coffee, but when he got back to Dalton's room, he saw the door slowly opening. As he looked in astonishment at the large figure coming out, Kevin rubbed his eyes, unsure if he was dreaming. He couldn't believe it was actually Dalton.
"Kevin, what the heck are you doing here?"
Dalton grinned broadly. "You scared me to death, buddy." Kevin gave Dalton a big hug as his eyes started to well up with tears.
"I'm okay. No need to cry, man."
Dalton patted Kevin on the back several times. Kevin's tears started to turn to laughter when he realized his best friend was going to be okay.
"I never knew you could be so emotional,"
Damon said with a loud laugh. They woke up the whole Steele family. Everyone was thrilled to see that he was safe and sound. Miranda burst into tears and couldn't stop kissing him on the cheek. Norman kept wiping his eyes until his handkerchief was soaked. Then Miranda told him about everything that had happened while he was in a coma. How the Night King had come and how Kevin had gotten the rare cure from Penny Sutherland. Dalton got a warm look in his eyes when he realized how much everyone had helped him.
"Kevin, I'm really grateful for everything you did, but I won't thank you."
Dalton squeezed Miranda's hand. "I never expected you to thank me," Kevin joked. They were kidding around like a couple of high schoolers. A little after sunrise, Kevin had breakfast with the Steele family. While they were eating, his cell phone rang. The caller ID showed that it was Officer Emmett. "Hello, Kelly. Why are you calling me so early in the morning?"
Kevin was in a good mood and felt like joking with her. He even called her by her first name, but it didn't seem to bother her. "Don't be mad at me, boss. I have a favor to ask of you. And by the way, haven't you heard that the early bird catches the worm?" Kelly replied shyly. "Say no more. You're calling about the power pill, aren't you?" Kevin got straight to the point. "How did you know that? Anyway, where are you going to be today? I'll meet you whenever you want, but I also want to ask if you have any extra herbal meds on you." She sounded a little embarrassed to be asking him. Kevin frowned. It wasn't like her to be so interested in meds. Even though it was easy for Kevin to make power pills now, he didn't want to get in the habit of handing them out like jelly beans. Was she just using him? "Why do you need so many herbals? Are you hitting a plateau in your training?" Kevin wondered out loud. "Not yet. I'm asking for my mentor. She hasn't been able to make any progress in nearly 3 years," Kelly answered bluntly. "If you have an extra power pill, do you think you could give it to me? If you help her to get to the next level, I'll be eternally grateful." But if Kelly wanted the power pill for her mentor in the Union, Kevin really wasn't in the mood to help. "Wait a second. I remember you belong to the Union and your mentor is really serious about her training." Kevin kept thinking about all the kinds of possibilities in his mind. Suddenly he got a glum look on his face. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Did your mentor call Director Silver?" Officer Emmett didn't notice the change in Kevin's tone of voice. She went on to heap praise on her mentor. "So you actually know her? She's one of the senior members of the Union. You may not know it, but even though she's pretty old, she's really good at training in herbalism. So she looks way younger than her actual age. Her goal is to do a lot of good in the world." "Good. That's really nice. I'm sorry, but unfortunately I don't have a power pill on me right now." Kevin narrowed his eyes slightly. Now that he knew that Director Silver was involved, he started to get angry. Although Renee Silver claimed to hate evildoers, she was just a fool who didn't know right from wrong. Actually, she was the bad guy, supporting the strong and bullying the weak. She couldn't hold a candle to Kevin's mentor, the Night King. It was a good thing he'd asked, otherwise he might have given her a power pill for her mentor's development. Of course, Kevin knew that the herbal med involved would be useless to a higher-level practitioner, but he'd rather just flush the pill down the toilet. That would be 10 times better than giving it to a fool like her. "What's going on, Kevin? I have a feeling it's bugging you to talk about my mentor." Officer Emmett had finally picked up on Kevin's signals. "Well, I'll just let you figure it out for yourself." After Kevin said this, he abruptly ended the call and didn't give her a chance to respond. Dalton could tell something wasn't right with Kevin. He scratched the back of his head and asked,
"What's wrong? Did you just get some bad news?"
"Officer Emmett's driving me nuts. She actually wanted a power pill from me so she could give it to Director Silver." Kevin looked out the window at the garden as he shook his head in disbelief.
"What?"
Dalton slapped his hand on the table angrily.
"She's actually studying with Director Silver?"
"She might as well be." Kevin knew that Officer Emmett was in deep with the Union.
"Kevin, don't give it to her. What a horrible idea. Do you want any help from me?"
Dalton agreed that it would be terrible to give her such powerful medication. Anyone else at that table couldn't help overhearing their conversation. The truth was that they all wanted a power pill too. Just when Rain was about to ask for it, Kevin's cell phone rang again.
"Doesn't she know when to give up? Give me her phone. I'll set her straight."
Dalton leaned forward and started to reach for Kevin's phone. Kevin glanced at his screen. "Nope, it's my wife this time." He swiped the screen to take the call. "What's the matter, Lily? Do you miss me?" "Kevin, can you please come home?" Lily's voice was very anxious. "What happened?" "I'm at Dalton's house right now. I'll be home as soon as I can." Kevin then turned to Dalton and said, "Looks like something happened back home. I have to get going."
"Go ahead. Just promise to call me if you get in any trouble."
Dalton didn't stop him. Before anybody had a chance to react, Kevin was already outside. He zipped over to Lily's condo and got there in minutes. When Lily saw him walk in, she ran to the door and gave him a big hug. "Kevin!" "Don't cry, Lily. Is someone bothering you? Tell me what's going on and I'll take care of the problem." Kevin patted her on the back and comforted her in a soft voice. "Mom's been in an explosion. I just got a call saying that she's been sent to Downtown General." Lily cried bitterly and said, "Kevin, what will we ever do if she doesn't make it?" "Don't cry, Lily. I know this isn't easy for you. Let's go to the hospital and see her." Kevin was feeling a little sad, mainly from seeing Lily crying. In any case, he didn't have a lot of warm feelings for Dorothy. She'd never been kind to him, but she was still a big part of Lily's life. Kevin drove to the hospital with Lily. She cried the whole way, and by the time they got there, her eyes were red and swollen. When they walked into the emergency room, they could hear people screaming and crying. There was blood everywhere, and hospital employees were doing their best to calm all the families while the doctors and nurses treated the victims. "Kevin, do you think Mom's here yet?" Lily was anxiously looking for her mother in the dense crowd. "Let's hope she made it." Kevin scanned the room and suddenly spotted her. "Come with me, Lily. I found your mom." Dorothy was sitting in the corner. Her clothes were tattered and torn. She also had some blood spattered on her face. Fortunately, she wasn't injured, but she looked scared and lost. Kevin didn't know why, but he suddenly felt sad for her. "How are you, Mom?" Lily quickly let go of Kevin's hand and anxiously ran over to her mother. She gave her a hug, but was afraid of hurting her just in case she had an injury they didn't know about. Suddenly, Officer Emmett came over and gave Kevin a pat on the shoulder. "What are you doing here, Kevin? Is everything all right?" She paused for a moment and then asked him, "What's the problem with my mentor?" "Let's not talk about it here. Why don't you go and ask her about it yourself?" Kevin could tell that Officer Emmett was curious to know why he had such negative feelings about her mentor. "Please tell me what happened." Officer Emmett was dying to find out the truth. "Forget about it, Kelly. It doesn't have anything to do with you." Kevin suddenly realized that he shouldn't make her pay for someone else's mistakes. What her mentor had done wasn't her fault. "I noticed you started calling me Kelly." She smiled a little. Kevin wondered if he'd made a mistake and maybe it wasn't appropriate. "That's okay, Kevin. I kind of like it." She paused and looked around the chaotic scene in the room. "Can you tell me anything about the explosion?" Kevin sighed. "The case is still under investigation. I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but what I can tell you is that we've apprehended the perpetrator." She took on her official police tone of voice as she spoke. "Can't be easy, can it?" Kevin looked her in the eyes as the scope of the crime sank in. "I'd rather not talk about it. For now, our focus is on the victims and their families. This'll keep us busy for weeks." Kelly turned around and left to return to her duties. Dorothy, who was still in shock, gave her daughter a worried look and complained, "Lily, we're finished. Our whole family is finished." Her voice was hoarse and she was struggling to speak. "What's the matter, Mom? You're scaring me." Lily wanted to comfort her mother, but she was too upset to do much good. "I listened to some advice that was too good to be true and used the condo as collateral. Then I invested all the money in the Pittsburgh International Trading Company. The project failed and now I can't get the money back." Dorothy wiped the tears as she told her daughter about the problem. "What are we going to do, Lily?" Dorothy was crying uncontrollably. "What kind of company is it? How dare they cheat an investor so blatantly?" Now that Lily understood the issue, she started to get angry. It was obvious that Pittsburgh International Trading didn't want to repay her mother. Kevin walked up to the two of them and suggested that they return home. "Lily, if the doctors say it's okay, let's get Mom back to the condo." "What are you talking about, you loser?" Dorothy was upset at her mistake, so she lashed out at Kevin. "If you weren't so lazy, I wouldn't be in this mess. Have you done anything since you married my daughter besides hang around and eat our food?" Dorothy stood up and scolded Kevin, completely forgetting that they were still in the hospital. Everyone within earshot turned around to glare at Kevin. "Mom, can you stop scolding him? This has nothing to do with Kevin. Besides, all that stuff is in the past. Yelling at him now won't change anything." It made Lily sad to see people looking at her husband like that. She just wanted to grab her mother and leave the hospital. "Why can't I scold him? I was a fool to ever let you marry him." Dorothy continued her harangue, and her voice was starting to carry across the emergency room. "I want you to just divorce this piece of trash once and for all. I'll find you a nice husband, maybe a movie star. Even though the condo is mortgaged to the hilt, we'd be better off without him." "Mom, what are you talking about? I'll never divorce Kevin." Lily's temper was starting to flare at the public scene her mother was making. She turned her head and looked at Kevin regretfully. But Lily didn't know that Kevin wasn't bothered at all about Dorothy's abuse. He seemed to be used to it, and he just let it go in one ear and out the other. "Don't be silly, Lily. What does this loser mean to you anyway?" Dorothy was very excited and added, "In any case, if you don't divorce him, then you're going to lose me." "Mom, how can you say that?" Lily's heart began pounding in her chest. "What should I say? Do you expect this bum to support our family for the rest of our lives? Do you think he'll find a way to get my money back?" Dorothy looked at Kevin viciously. Jasmine Coleman, who had just arrived in the hospital, interrupted them and put her 2 cents in. "Dorothy, don't expect Pittsburgh International to pay back the money they owe you. I just found out that their owner, Conrad Ferguson, is partnered with Drake Cook. I've got a feeling the explosion has something to do with him." Jasmine had been cheated out at least 5 times the amount that Dorothy had lost. "Drake Cook?" Dorothy looked absolutely devastated to hear that. She took a step back and almost fell on the floor. Anybody but Drake. Nobody in Chicago dared to cross that man. He had a vile reputation, to say the least. Now Kevin understood why Kelly didn't want to talk about the explosion. Drake was close to Mitchell Cook, so that made him really hard to handle. If he got pushed too far, he might cause a lot of trouble in the city. "Well, let's just admit it. There's no need to get into a fight with Drake over a little bit of money," Jasmine sighed helplessly. Although her husband was a successful businessman, he wouldn't be much help right now because he was thousands of miles away working on a deal. "No, I think I have a way." Dorothy suddenly seemed more confident. "What can you do? I know your son-in-law knows some people with connections, but can he pull some strings with Drake?" As Jasmine said this, she glanced over at Kevin. The scene in Lily's hospital room a few weeks before was etched in her mind. "Why would you ever count on this piece of trash?" Dorothy sneered. "I have an idea. Do you know Niles Walford from the Walford family? He likes my daughter a whole lot. If I tell him about this mess, he might find a way to get the money back for us." Dorothy went on to explain. "The Walford family has a lot of businesses in Chicago. I'm sure they have some connections with Mitchell Cook. Drake might listen to him instead of Conrad Ferguson." There were a few wealthy women waiting nearby. One of them asked, "Dorothy, the Walford family you're talking about, isn't that the one that's involved with Dominic Archer?" Another one of the women couldn't help asking, "One of the Walfords is after your daughter? Is that really true?" "Well, if you don't believe me, I'll call Niles right this second." Dorothy pulled out her cell phone and started to make the call. "The Walford family? Which family is that?" Kevin started to frown. He knew almost all the influential families in Chicago, but he had no idea who the Walfords were. What also surprised Kevin was that Dorothy said that Niles liked Lily a lot. How come he didn't know about this before? "Don't be mad, Kevin. I have nothing to do with the guy." Lily could see the expression on Kevin's face, and she reacted right away so he wouldn't misunderstand. She put her hand on his arm and smiled sweetly. "I'm not angry, but I would like to have a nice little chat with him," Kevin said with a sneer. In Chicago, there weren't a lot of people who were friends with Drake Cook. You could probably count them on one hand. So if Niles knew him, he was somebody worth looking into. By now, Dorothy's call had gone through. She smiled happily and said, "Niles, are you busy right now? I may need your help with something."
"What's the matter, Dorothy? Go ahead and tell me. There aren't many things that I can't handle in this town. Where are you? I'll meet you right away." Everyone could hear his voice coming through Dorothy's earpiece.
"I'm at the Downtown General in the ER. If you have the time, come right over."
Dorothy hung up the phone looking very proud of herself. She sneered at the other woman and said,
"Now do you think I was just making it up?"
They were astonished because they'd never expected Dorothy to be so close to such a powerful man.
"We don't have to worry about our problem now. All we need to do is wait for Niles to get here. He'll deal with it."
When Dorothy said this, she was full of confidence. "Let's go home, Kevin." Lily pulled on Kevin's sleeve to urge him to leave.
"Do we have anything important to do at home? Mom said a big shot was coming. Let's stay around and meet him," Kevin said with a smile. He had a feeling that Niles Walford was all talk and no action.
In the emergency room at Downtown General, Dorothy told Lily and Kevin about her financial problems after losing her investment with Pittsburgh International Trading Company. She decided to ask Niles Walford for help, but she really wanted him to replace Kevin as her son-in-law. "I have nothing to do with Niles, so I don't want to see him either." Lily thought Kevin was uncomfortable and trying to act like the idea was ridiculous. "We can head home later. You don't want to leave Mom here all alone, do you?" Kevin patted Lily reassuringly on the back of her hand. Soon a stretch limo worth at least $200,000 pulled up and blocked the entire entrance to the ER. A man in a white suit got out and headed inside. As soon as he walked through the doorway, Dorothy's eyes lit up. She started waving her arms and shouting, "Niles, I'm over here!" "What are you doing here? Are you okay?" Niles saw that Dorothy's clothes were tattered, and she looked like she'd been through a battle. At the same time, he looked around and saw the other injured women waiting for treatment nearby. "Well, it's hard to say. I couldn't count on my useless son-in-law, so I decided to ask you to help me." Dorothy hung her head and let out a sigh. That's when Niles noticed that Lily was standing there, and he got a lustful look in his eyes. But when he saw Kevin, his expression got a little more serious. "Is that you, Lily?" Niles greeted her with a smile. But Lily didn't pay too much attention to him. She just nodded her head politely. Dorothy was upset to see Lily's reaction. "Where are your manners, Lily? Have you been hanging around with that trash too much? Niles is talking to you." "Don't worry about it, Dorothy. Let's talk about your business first. After I deal with that, I'll have a good chat with Lily." Niles smiled sweetly and continued, "You should come to visit me. It's been a long time since I saw you. You know I bought you a lovely bracelet, but I haven't had a chance to give it to you." Niles didn't pay any attention to Kevin at all. To him, Kevin was a nobody. "I'm sure you'll find a solution. You always do." Dorothy smiled broadly. Her rich friends sitting nearby were green with envy. While Dorothy was talking to Niles, Lily gently pulled Kevin's arm. "What are we going to do, sweetie?" Lily knew what kind of man Niles was. She thought he was a bad influence, cocky, and self-important. If Niles managed to help Dorothy solve her problem, she would certainly pressure her to divorce Kevin, or at least push him out of their home. "Don't worry about it. Let's see what happens," Kevin replied with a smile. Dorothy explained the problem she was having with Conrad Ferguson and how she and her friends had been cheated by him. After Dorothy finished, Niles nodded his head in understanding. "Is that all, Dorothy?" He didn't seem very worried at all. "I'll call my father right away and ask him to have a talk with Drake. I'll also straighten things out with Conrad." When she saw Niles pull out his cell phone, Dorothy's heart was full of joy. He was young and handsome, came from a good family, and had a lot of good social connections. Niles would simply be the perfect son-in-law for her. He was way better than Kevin, who'd never accomplished a thing in his life. Everyone could hear Niles talking with his father on the phone. He quickly gave him a rundown of Dorothy's problem. He didn't know Drake Cook personally, but his father was good friends with Dominic Archer. So as long as Conrad returned Dorothy's money, no one would find out that Niles didn't know Drake at all. At the same time, he'd impressed the heck out of Dorothy, killing two birds with one stone. But the next second, his father's reply ruined his plans. "Son of a bitch, are you crazy? Do you have any idea what's going on? I barely know Dominic Archer. What do you expect me to say to him?" "What do you think, Dad?" Niles forced a smile while he tried to calm himself down so Dorothy and the others wouldn't realize he was full of crap. What do I think? Ha! You must be joking. Do you have any idea who Drake is? Even if I knew Dominic, that wouldn't mean a thing. Niles' father roared. Get back home right now and don't stick your nose in anybody's business anymore. You're boxing way above your weight class. Mr. Walford hung up and Niles stood there with the phone stuck against his ear, uneasy about the entire situation. If Drake wouldn't even listen to Dominic, then he didn't have a chance of getting Dorothy's money back for her. Niles, what did your father say? Dorothy had no idea that anything was wrong. Don't worry about anything. My father said he'll take care of everything. Niles had no choice but to lie. He just wanted to buy some time so he could scoot out of the hospital. Kevin stifled a laugh. He'd been right about Niles all along. It's obvious that he's bitten off more than he could chew, Kevin thought as he shook his head and smirked. Then he put his arm around Lily's shoulder and declared, Mom, don't start counting your chickens. I don't think Niles can handle your problem. What are you talking about? The smile on Niles Walford's face disappeared and he flew into a rage. Are you questioning me? You don't think I can handle it? Well, why don't you show us what you can do, big shot? Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, Dorothy said quickly, Niles, listen to me. You belong to the Walford family. What do you care what this loser thinks? Dorothy turned her head and glared at Kevin again. If you don't know how to behave, just keep your big mouth closed. The bystander seemed to agree with Dorothy. Kevin couldn't possibly be as wealthy and capable as Niles. Just look at how he was dressed. One of them commented, Dorothy, I think your daughter would be a perfect match for Niles. A match made in heaven. They all started making fun of Kevin, and they all expected Niles to get their money back from the bad investment. If he couldn't do that, they'd be in big trouble. Are you okay, Kevin? Don't listen to any of them. You know I'd never divorce you. Lily comforted him in a sweet voice. Don't worry, honey. I'm fine. Just give me a second to make a call. Kevin stepped to the side and pulled out his phone to call Drake. At that very moment, Drake Cook and Conrad Ferguson were having coffee in a private room at the Whistler Hotel. When Drake's phone rang, he was pleasantly surprised. Kevin, how can I help you? Kevin immediately started chewing him out. What the heck is going on over there? Your people have gone too far with their get-rich-quick schemes. Do you know what I'm talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about, Kevin. Drake was completely confused and was trying to figure out what he'd done wrong. You really have no idea. Let me jog your memory. Kevin continued to give him hell. Do you have a man named Conrad Ferguson who started a company called Pittsburgh International Trading? And do you know that he cheated my mother-in-law and her friends out of all their money? And on top of that, he had someone try to blow them up to intimidate them. Fortunately, she's okay, otherwise you'd both be at the bottom of Lake Michigan right now. Are you sure, Kevin? How could something like that happen? Drake understood right away how serious this was, and his mouth started to get dry. If Kevin told his father Mitchell Cook, he'd have to worry about more than getting tossed in the lake. His father had the worst temper of anyone he knew. Have you ever known me to be wrong? I'm at Downtown General. Drake, you've got 2 hours to return the money or you'd better be wearing swim trunks. When Kevin finished talking, he hung up the phone. Kevin, hello? Hello? Drake angrily threw his phone on the table and glared at Conrad, who was just sitting there enjoying his latte. The next thing he knew, Conrad landed on the floor with a loud bang. Drake, what's going on? What did I do? Conrad struggled to figure out why he was getting the crap beaten out of him. What's going on? Why didn't you tell me what's going on with you? Did you start Pittsburgh International Trading so you could bilk people out of their money? And did you terrorize them with explosives? Drake picked Conrad up by his neck and growled angrily. Please stop, Drake. Yes, I started Pittsburgh International, but I brought in almost $200 million. Isn't that great? Conrad looked like he was going to cry as he tried to explain. As for the explosion, it was a clean job. The cops will never find a clue. And anyway, the people I swindled were nobodies.
Good job, you dumbass. I hope you'll be happy when I disappear and end up in the foundation of the next skyscraper that goes up in Chicago, Drake roared. Do you know how much you've hurt my business screwing around like that?
How could I possibly have hurt you, Drake? But if anyone's going to take the rap for this, I'll do it. Conrad begged Drake to let him go. He'd rather face the police than him or his father.
I'll tell you what you did. One of the people you grifted was my good friend Kevin's mother-in-law.
Drake moved his hand up to Conrad's throat and threatened.
Return all the money immediately or our partnership is over. The hard way.
All right, I'll pay them back right away. Conrad was really scared. He had known Drake for almost 8 years, and this was the first time he'd ever talked to him like this. As Conrad was walking toward the door, Drake stopped him. What else do you want from me? He asked him timidly.
You're going to downtown General Hospital with me. If Kevin doesn't let you off the hook, you'll have to deal with the both of us.
Drake grabbed his coat and strode out of the room. A half hour later, while Niles Walford was still bragging to Dorothy, Drake and Conrad walked into the emergency room. Hey, isn't that Conrad Ferguson? Someone said loudly. A group of people started to surround them. Then someone else yelled, The guy with him looks like Drake Cook.
What's Drake doing here? Dad told me he didn't know him, Niles wondered. Maybe he got a hold of Dominic after all.
Niles started to feel really important when he thought that his family was responsible for this. Drake was actually returning the money in person. Just then, Drake shoved Conrad towards the women.
What are you waiting for? Do you want me to hold your hand or something?
Don't worry, I'll do it, Conrad moaned. He stepped in front of them and explained. I'm sorry, but we had some technical issues at the company and I wasn't able to return your investment. I've managed to transfer enough funds to reimburse you. Plus, I heard about your unfortunate accident, so I've included some interest to help you out. Conrad was very handsome and knew how to handle the upper class. He did his best to distance himself from the explosion so nobody would suspect he'd been involved.
We'll consider this matter settled then. But if you do something like this again, you'll have to deal with me.
Niles Walford raised his chin high and took on a threatening tone toward Conrad. Dorothy and the others all looked at Niles and had the same thought. He really is from an important family. Look at all his connections. Conrad looked at Niles in shock for a few seconds. He actually thought that Niles was Drake's good friend Kevin. Out of fear, Conrad nodded and replied, I swear I'll never do it again.
Just remember your promise.
Then Niles turned to the other man and sneered.
And are you Drake? Why don't you come over and apologize to these nice ladies?
He decided this was his chance to show that he was superior to Drake Cook. Then nobody in all of Chicago could touch him. As soon as Niles said this, Conrad started to worry. He thought to himself, who is this guy? How can he get away with talking to Drake like that? Dorothy and the others were ecstatic. They knew all about Drake's reputation and they'd never expected Niles to force him to apologize to them. Drake turned and looked at Kevin, but Kevin rolled his eyes as if to say, I have no idea who this guy is. Deal with it any way you want. Drake instantly understood and walked slowly towards the crowd. Niles, don't be too hard on him. After all, Drake is also a very important man. Dorothy was trying to seem generous, but inside she was feeling very pleased with herself. All she could think of was how she would make Lily divorce Kevin so she could marry Niles. Then everyone would look up to her again. Her friends were impressed and thanked Dorothy for getting Niles to come down to the hospital and take care of their problem so quickly. It was really starting to go to Dorothy's head.
What did you just say?
Drake scowled and walked over towards Niles. I asked you to apologize, but don't you understand plain English? Niles said arrogantly. He knew that Dominic Archer was a powerful man. With Dominic's backing, Niles was about to make Drake Cook apologize in public. This would do wonders for his street cred. He felt really good about himself for about 5 seconds. Then Drake punched him right in the gut. He hit the floor like a sack of potatoes and lay there for a good long time, unable to stand up. Everyone was stunned by this. What the heck was going on? Didn't Niles call Drake to come down here and apologize? Why did he just punch him in the stomach instead? Niles puked a couple of times and his body started to shake. What he didn't know was that his day was about to get even worse. Niles had convinced Dorothy and her friends that he'd arranged for Drake and Conrad to come down to the hospital and return their money with a personal apology. Suddenly, Drake punched Niles in the stomach, leaving him writhing in pain on the floor.
"How dare you hit me?"
Niles struggled to get up from the ground, but he just couldn't seem to do it.
"Who the hell are you? Nobody talks to me like that."
Drake growled at Niles, and you could feel his anger building.
"Didn't you bring Conrad Ferguson here because my father sent you?"
Niles asked hesitantly.
"Are you brainless or something? We came down here because Kevin sent us."
Drake pointed at Kevin, who was standing off to the side shaking his head.
"Open your eyes and take a good look. That's my buddy Kevin over there."
Everyone looked in the direction that Drake pointed to. They were all stunned. Kevin waved to them with a big grin on his face. Dorothy's friends all stared at Kevin in disbelief, thinking to themselves, "Isn't that Dorothy's son-in-law? How come he's friends with Drake? I thought Kevin was a nobody." Dorothy was shocked to see Kevin. Then she remembered something. At Grandma Jones's birthday party, when Jason called Drake to intimidate Kevin, he ended up getting beaten up himself instead. Kevin and Drake were friends back then too. She realized that she didn't know Kevin at all. Why did this keep happening? How did he have so many powerful friends? Dorothy stared at Kevin with a confused look in her eyes. "Drake, who is this guy?" Conrad asked as he pointed at Niles.
"I have no idea where he came from,"
Drake replied as he shrugged his shoulders. After getting a straight answer, Conrad took a deep breath, then walked over to Niles, grabbed the lapel of his bright white suit jacket, and slapped him right in the face. "What kind of game are you playing? I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." As Conrad said this, he punched Niles several times in the stomach.
"How dare you hit me? Don't you know who I am? Haven't you heard of the Walford family?"
Niles roared angrily. "The Walford family? The Walford family?" Conrad looked back at Drake to make sure he wouldn't cause him any more trouble.
"Never heard of them."
Drake scratched his head and answered calmly. When they heard this, everyone took a deep breath. Had Niles just been pretending this whole time? Drake has never even heard of the man's family.
"Let me warn you, Dominic Archer won't let you off easy if you do anything to hurt the Walford family. I have no problem letting him kill you,"
Niles roared loudly.
"Oh, so you run with Dominic?"
Drake walked up to Niles and gave him a backhand to the face. Drake was even more vicious than Conrad. Niles' face swelled up like he had the mumps.
"Do you really think I give a crap? Even if Dominic were standing here right now, I'd teach you a lesson,"
Drake said coldly as he kept punching him in the face.
"You really think a lot of yourself. I'm sure Dominic doesn't give a rat's ass about you. He wouldn't lose a second of sleep if I killed you."
Drake let go of Niles and he dropped to his knees, doubled over in agony. Then Drake turned around and walked quickly to Kevin.
"I'm really sorry, my friend. I kinda lost my temper, but guys like that really piss me off."
"Just pay attention from now on," Kevin replied tersely.
"I'll be sure of that."
Drake smiled as he shook Kevin's hand. "If it's okay with you, just leave the money here and head back to the hotel." Kevin gave Drake a little smile. Originally, this nonsense had nothing to do with him. If it wasn't for Dorothy, he wouldn't have gotten involved at all. After Drake and Conrad left, Dorothy's friends came back to their senses and started to flatter her. "My God, Dorothy, I had no idea that your son-in-law is so powerful," one of them commented. Kevin doesn't look like a loser to me. He's got to be one of the most important people in the whole city," another one remarked enviously. Kevin chuckled a little at how everyone was reacting to him. What he did was really nothing at all, but they were making such a big deal about it. Then the crowd circled around Niles. Kevin was everything that Niles had been pretending to be, and now he looked like a clown. After hearing all her friends praising Kevin, Dorothy tried to act like she didn't think Kevin was all that bad. "Well, I have to admit it. My son-in-law is really pretty capable, but he's still very young. That's why I deliberately said all those things. I didn't want him to get too full of himself. It's good to have some modesty." Her friends bought her excuse and then started giving her invitations to breakfast, dinner, even to join their next poker game. Dorothy gladly accepted their offers. When the women left, they stopped to thank Kevin on the way out, and they said that he was welcome to come to their homes too if he wanted. On the way home, Dorothy, who was sitting in the back seat, kept staring at Kevin. Lily had an enormous, satisfied grin on her face. She found that Kevin was becoming more and more mysterious, and her imagination was running wild. When they got back to the condo, Lily and Dorothy went to get some rest. They were grateful that the money had been returned. Otherwise, the bank could have taken their home, and the three of them would have had to find a new place to live. Kevin didn't want to reveal his true identity to Lily yet. After all, the Williams family's frame-up hadn't been resolved, and he really didn't want Dorothy to go live with his parents. Kevin didn't want to slack off on his training, so he went to the study to read up on herbal medicine and practice his skills. Even though he was very rich in the financial world, he had a long way to go in the world of herbalism, especially compared to people who had been training for years, let alone someone as powerful as his mentor, the Night King. A little past 1 in the morning, Kevin suddenly opened his eyes and clearly heard the sound of footsteps. "Is there a burglar in the house?" Kevin frowned and thought to himself. When he saw the door opening, he stood up from his chair. "Mom?" Kevin exclaimed in surprise. With the help of the moonlight shining in from the window, he could see that his visitor was Dorothy. "What are you doing in the study this late at night? Shouldn't you be in bed?" Kevin walked over and flicked on the light so they could see each other better. But Dorothy didn't answer Kevin's question. She just stood there staring at him. "Is everything all right?" Kevin started to feel uncomfortable as Dorothy kept looking at him. "Kevin, tell me honestly, are you hiding your identity from us?" Dorothy finally asked the question that had been keeping her awake all night. Why is she suddenly asking me this? Kevin wondered as he scratched his head. He didn't know what to say for a moment. "I just have to know or I'll never be able to fall asleep. Tell me the truth, Kevin. It's just the two of us here. No matter what you say, I won't tell a soul." Dorothy closed the door gently behind her. The atmosphere in the room suddenly got a little awkward. Kevin was uncomfortable being alone with Dorothy, especially with all of the horrible things she'd done to him over the years. Plus, he really didn't want to tell her the truth, at least not before he told Lily. "Let's talk about it tomorrow, Mom." Kevin slightly lowered his head, a little afraid to look her in the eyes. He quickly stepped around her, opened the door, and headed off to go to sleep. But the more he behaved like this, the more he confirmed Dorothy's suspicions. At that very moment, in their luxurious mansion in the suburbs of Chicago, Mackenzie Knott and her grandfather were sitting on the sofa. A middle-aged man was sitting with them, looking shocked as he examined a reddish-brown pill. "Uncle Dylan, can you tell if it's authentic? It's way past my bedtime and I'm getting kind of sleepy." Mackenzie yawned a few times. Dylan was a trusted member of the Knott family. He was also the only herbalist in the whole family, so they always went to him for advice. Until now, he'd been able to make some herbal meds that helped to suppress Mackenzie's symptoms. So when Mackenzie returned home earlier that day, she found Dylan and asked him to check out the repair pill that Kevin had given her. "Don't rush me, Mackenzie. Let me take a good look at it." Although Dylan was getting on in his years, his training had given him a lot of energy, especially at night. A few minutes later, Dylan sat up straight and smiled at her. "Whoever made this did an incredible job. Incredible.
You've definitely got an authentic repair pill, and it looks like it's top quality. Whoever made this is quite a good herbalist."
"What? Uncle Dylan, are you sure this is really a repair pill?" Mackenzie asked him in surprise.
"I'm certain my colleagues would agree. Although the specific preparation method for a repair pill disappeared nearly 100 years ago, I know what they should look like,"
Dylan explained to her as he tried to control his excitement.
"According to the sources I checked, the repair pill should be reddish-brown. The lower quality one would be light red in color. There are other characteristics to look for, including fragrance, and this herbal med looks like it's the real thing."
Dylan said this with obvious admiration.
"Do you mind if I ask where you got this pill?"
Dylan then asked her. Mackenzie immediately pictured Kevin in her mind, and then she thought about how he'd seen her in her underwear in the video call. She started to blush and whispered, "It was made by a friend of mine."
"You're very lucky to know him. I'm guessing your friend must be about the same age as you. Someone that young who has skills like this is destined for greatness," Dylan said excitedly. Even though Mackenzie was his niece, he'd watched her grow up and considered her to be like a daughter to him. After Mackenzie had been suffering for so many years, Dylan was starting to get worried about her. Now with the repair pill, all her problems were solved. "Mackenzie, please answer me honestly. What kind of relationship do you have with your friend?" her grandfather asked her seriously. He was astonished that such an advanced med could have been prepared by such a young man. He was close to being a master at it. If the Knott family could get to know someone like that, they could really increase their level of development and meet any challenge they faced. "Grandpa, why are you asking me that?" Mackenzie's face started to get even more flushed. "What are you blushing about? I'm just asking you a simple question," he smiled. "It seems to me that someone who can do work like this could really help our family a lot." "Grandpa, do you really want to get involved with an outsider? In any case, I think you've already met him." Mackenzie still hesitated to admit who it was. "What?" Grandpa Knott got a puzzled look on his face. "You say I already met him? Where did this happen? Why don't I remember it?" Grandpa Knott loved Mackenzie very much. On weekdays, a lot of young women stopped by to visit with her, and they were all related to his old friends in the Myriads. But Grandpa Knott had only been in Chicago for less than a month, ever since he'd been sent there by the Myriads. How many young people had he met? Not to mention such a gifted genius. "Grandpa, you're getting forgetful. Remember when you had to be saved at the auction house?" Mackenzie answered in a low voice so that Grandpa Knott wouldn't be able to see the expression on her face. "You mean it's that young man?" Grandpa Knott's eyes lit up as he began to remember. But when he left the auction house, he was still in a coma, and he didn't see what Kevin looked like. He'd never met the young man who had saved him. Dylan told him about it later. "Mackenzie, are you friends with him? If you are, can you bring him over to see me?" Grandpa Knott decided that he definitely had to meet Kevin, whether it was for his family or for the Myriads. As Dylan had already said, someone who could do this at such a young age was destined to do great things. "Really?" Mackenzie looked up in surprise. "What do you want to see him for, Grandpa?" "What's the matter? Can't I meet any of your friends?" Grandpa Knott smiled playfully. "Yes, of course you can." Mackenzie was blushing more than ever now. The night passed quickly. Kevin and Lily were awakened by a knock on the door. "Who is it?"
Kevin wasn't fully awake yet and was rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He was stunned when he opened the door. Dorothy was standing there with a huge grin on her face. "Mom, what are you doing so early?" Kevin asked doubtfully. "Get up, sleepyheads. I've already made breakfast for you. Hurry up and wash, then come down to the table." Dorothy turned her head and looked at Lily, who was still half asleep. "Come on, little one. Why are you still sleeping? Don't you see that Kevin is already up? Hurry up now." Kevin and Lily were baffled. Since the day they got married, when did Dorothy ever make them breakfast? "Hurry up and get ready. I'll go down to the kitchen and get the coffee brewing." After Dorothy said this, she turned around and headed downstairs. Kevin closed the door, turned his head, and looked at Lily. He shrugged his shoulders and asked her, "Do you think your mother's been in the liquor cabinet this morning?" "Maybe she's sick." Lily hadn't completely recovered from the surprise. "Why don't you take Mom to the doctor for a checkup?" Kevin suggested. "This definitely isn't normal."
Dorothy really wanted to know Kevin's secret. She thought he may not be trash after all. The following morning, Kevin and Lily were surprised when Dorothy got up early to make them breakfast. "Kevin, I don't understand you. When my mother was mean to you, I thought she was being unfair. Now that she's being nice to you, you still can't accept it?" Lily joked as she yawned and tried to wake up. "I guess I just got used to it. Let's get downstairs as soon as possible. We shouldn't make your mom wait too long," Kevin urged her while quickly getting dressed. Half an hour later, Lily finally finished putting on her makeup and went down to the dining room with Kevin. "What's the matter with you two kids? I have to run some errands today. Do you want me to be late? Now dig in. Your breakfast is getting cold." Dorothy ordered them as she sat at the table. Kevin and Lily gave each other a strange look, but they didn't say much. They quietly sat down at the table and ate their breakfast. "Have the scrambled eggs I made for you." Dorothy put the plate in front of Kevin with a smile. Before picking up the serving spoon, Dorothy continued, "And this is the oatmeal I made specially for you." "Thanks, Mom. Just put it there. I can serve myself." Kevin awkwardly stood up and got Lily a bowl, too. This made Dorothy unhappy, and she thought to herself, "Is it too cheap for him?" One thing that Dorothy was certain about was that Kevin wasn't as simple as he seemed. In the future, if she lost her money again, she would have to rely on him. So Dorothy forced herself to smile so Kevin couldn't tell what she was thinking. "Kevin, I've never asked you this before. What are your plans for the future? For example, what kind of company will you work for?" Dorothy tried to keep smiling, but her distress showed in her eyes. "Well, to be honest, I haven't really thought about it." Kevin scratched his head awkwardly. For him, the most important thing was to improve his strength, and at least to have the ability to protect himself from all the dangerous people he was about to face. That's the only way he could return to the Williams family and set things straight. "Kevin, it's natural for a mother to ask questions like this. It's better to make a detailed plan for the future. Otherwise, you may waste your time," Dorothy explained as she frowned a little. "Don't worry, Mom. I know that's a good idea, but right now things are pretty volatile, and my plans keep changing," Kevin answered calmly and sincerely. "What do you mean? Why are you pretending to be poor in front of Lily and me? Are you happy when I complain all day long?" Dorothy was out of patience. "To be honest," he started to reply. "What is the truth?" Dorothy interrupted Kevin before he could explain. "Why won't you listen to me? If you want to live comfortably with my family, you'll have to contribute some money." Dorothy sighed. "I really don't know much about you, but I've seen a lot of problems in you since you married Lily. What's the use of hoarding so much money?" She wouldn't let Kevin get a word in edgewise. Dorothy had a disgusted look on her face as she finally got to the point. "I'm your mother-in-law. You've been eating and drinking for free for 3 years. Wouldn't it be right to pay me back in some way?" But Kevin just sat there and listened to her. Lily put down her spoon and defended Kevin. "Mom, what are you talking about? Kevin doesn't have much time to work now. Besides, if he has any money, it belongs to him, not us. We can't just take it from him." "Why can't you ask your freeloading husband for a little money? I'm his mother-in-law. You're his wife. It's normal to ask him to chip in." She was getting impatient and desperate to convince Kevin to share his wealth. "Don't you know that having too much money can spoil you? And it's not like I'd spend any of the money. I just keep it for him so he wouldn't be tempted to go out and fool around and waste it." Dorothy was really laying it on thick. Kevin took a sip of his coffee and smiled. In fact, ever since the whole ugly scene with Drake and Niles, Kevin was expecting Dorothy to do something like this. but he didn't expect her to ramp things up so fast.
Mom, you're being unreasonable. He needs to set aside some money for a rainy day.
Lily was starting to get angry with her mother. Nonsense! Dorothy got up and took the oatmeal out of Kevin's hands and grabbed his plate of eggs. If you don't pay, you don't eat. Then, while Kevin and Lily watched in awe, Dorothy threw them into the trash along with the bowl and the dish. Remember to clean up before you leave. By the way, the trash has already been picked up. Dorothy walked upstairs, cursing to herself. After her performance, Kevin could only shake his head helplessly. Lily turned to him and pouted. Kevin? It's all right, Lily. Go ahead and eat, and I'll clean up. We don't want to be late for school, Kevin answered with a smile. An hour and a half later, Kevin entered the classroom just as the bell rang. Professor Murdoch followed him in. As soon as he saw her, Kevin felt a little surprised. It had been a long time since she took the neutralization pill, but she looked like she was still okay. How could that be? Could my sources be wrong? Kevin frowned as he tried to figure out why Professor Murdoch hadn't gotten any worse. As she looked around the classroom, Professor Murdoch announced, "This morning we're going to have a study session to go over what we learned last week. Kevin, please come to the office with me." A lot of the students in the class were confused by this. Professor Murdoch wanted to meet with Kevin alone? If the school had a message for them, shouldn't Mike be told first as the student leader?
Do you have any idea why the professor asked that loser to go to her office?
Luther whispered to Mike. How the heck would I know? Mike replied in frustration. Kevin must be in some kind of trouble. Didn't you see the look on Professor Murdoch's face just now? She's really upset. Lionel said loudly enough for the other students to hear him.
I think you're right. Kevin's just a troublemaker.
Luther agreed with his friend. Then the other students in the class began to whisper to each other. Dalton couldn't stand to hear it. He slapped his hand so hard on his desk that he made an indentation in the shape of his hand.
Don't you guys have anything better to do all day? All you do is flap your tongues.
Dalton glared at Mike and his two groupies. The whole class knew enough about Dalton's temper by now. Luther and Lionel backed off and sank down in their seats. But Mike, the student leader, thought he needed to stand up to Dalton as a matter of pride. He figured he'd have more power in the class if he got Dalton to back down. Dalton, we're talking about Kevin, not you. Why are you getting so worked up? Isn't it true that he must have done something wrong to be called to the professor's office? Mike said in a low voice.
It sounds to me like you're itching for a fight.
When Dalton balled up his fists, they looked like two sledgehammers. Apparently, when the Night King treated him for his injuries, the herbal med that he created with the help of the Golden Water Gemstone had transformed him so that his strength had increased even more. His hands had gotten so solid that being punched by him felt like getting hit by a rock. His classmates could see that there was something different about him, and, as beginners in their physical development, they knew they were no match for Dalton.
This is the last time I'll say it. If anyone says anything about Kevin in the future, I'll break their legs.
Then Dalton snorted and went back to his reading. Meanwhile, Professor Murdoch and Kevin were walking into her office. Kevin had learned enough by now to recognize that Professor Murdoch had lost a lot of her progress. She seemed quite a bit weaker than before. Professor, why have you asked me to see you this morning? Do you want to invite me to breakfast? Kevin was trying to ease the tension as he pulled up a chair and sat down. Kevin, I remember you said that there was a way to solve the problem of my loss of strength after taking the neutralization pill. Professor Murdoch ignored his rudeness. To tell the truth, even if she cared, she didn't have the strength left to do anything about it. All the progress she'd made over the years had been lost. For someone like Professor Murdoch, feeling like this was a fate worse than death. She was feeling so powerless that even her students were probably more advanced than she was by now. To keep anyone from noticing her loss of energy, Professor Murdoch had been drinking tons of coffee, and it was starting to wear her down. It was tough to act normal when she wasn't. Yes, I did say that. But I also remember you said that with your eyesight you could see that Mike's pill was okay, Kevin said as he looked her in the eye. I guess I did. Professor Murdoch started to blush a little from the embarrassment. As I recall, I warned you again and again. It's a pity, Professor, that you didn't listen to me. Kevin wanted to be clear that this wasn't his fault. Professor Murdoch nodded her head. I know, Kevin. Believe it or not, a teacher can make mistakes too, but can you help me? Professor Murdoch had decided that she'd pay anything to get Kevin to help her. She couldn't bear losing her strength and mental clarity over this dumb mistake. Well, Professor, I'm pretty busy these days. Can you give me some time to think about it? Kevin leaned back in his chair and shrugged his shoulders a couple of times. I don't know what's been going on lately. My shoulders are feeling so tight. If only someone could massage them for me. Kevin knew that Professor Murdoch would understand what he was asking her to do. Sure enough, Professor Murdoch stood up, clenched her teeth, and walked around her desk to stand behind Kevin's chair. Then she reached out her hands and started rubbing his shoulders. Yeah, keep it going. Don't stop, Kevin said with a look of enjoyment on his face. That feels great, Professor. I had no idea you were so good at this. She was one of the senior members of the union, and until taking Mike's pill, a very powerful person. Here she was degrading herself to get help from one of her students. If anybody walked in on them, how could she stay at the school? But she had to bite the bullet. Only Kevin had a way to help her recover. That feels wonderful, Professor Murdoch. I almost forgot what we were talking about. Kevin was milking the situation for all he could. What did you say? Are you pulling my leg? Professor Murdoch suddenly got a little irritated. She pinched Kevin's shoulder and pushed him away. Don't be angry, Professor. Just hear me out. Kevin knew that he'd gone a little too far. But how could he pass up a chance like this? After all, he tried to warn her. Kevin, if you have a way to reverse the effects of that pill, just say so. If you don't have a way, head on back to the classroom. I'll have to find someone else, but I don't have a second to waste. Professor Murdoch had never sounded as serious about anything in her life. Of course I have a way. Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out a pale blue pill. This is a kind of elevation pill that can relieve the effects of the neutralization pill. Each one you take can cancel about 1/3 of the other pill's effects. It's kind of complicated because you have to neutralize a neutralization, if that makes any sense. Before Kevin could even finish speaking, Professor Murdoch grabbed the pill out of his hand, took a few steps, and swallowed the pill dry. Unfortunately, she hadn't waited to hear Kevin's instructions. As Kevin was explaining the instructions for taking the elevation pill, Professor Murdoch snatched the pill out of his hand and took it, without even getting a glass of water. About 3 seconds later, a weird, dull sound came from Professor Murdoch's body. Even Kevin, who was on the other side of the room, could hear it clearly. Professor Murdoch started to look different, like her body was filling up with energy. Kevin could see her aura changing as it began to return to its normal state. Professor Murdoch was definitely starting to recover what she had lost after taking the neutralization pill. Kevin just gave a slight smile. He had a feeling that the professor would take a huge step after this first dose of the herbal med. But it bothered him a little that Professor Murdoch was a member of the union, so Kevin wasn't sure it was right or wrong to help her recover her strength and training. Is that it? I feel better, but I'm still not back to my old self. Professor Murdoch was wondering if something was wrong and started to panic that she wouldn't make a full recovery. Professor, have you forgotten what I said? This elevation pill can only counteract 1/3 of the effect of the neutralization pill. If you want to completely restore your strength, you need to take 2 more pills. Kevin explained the process to her very calmly. What about the other 2? Give them to me right now. Professor Murdoch ran over to Kevin, grabbed him by the shoulders, and shook him. Don't get so excited, Professor. Let me finish what I was saying, would you? Kevin completely understood what she was feeling right now, so he wasn't too surprised at her behavior. I won't listen to you until you give me the pills. Professor Murdoch had a look in her eyes like a hungry wolf staring at a nice plump sheep. But Professor, you can only take one elevation pill every 2 days. The way you're acting, I'm afraid that if I gave them to you now, you'd take them both at once, before you're ready, Kevin explained patiently. Just give me the next 2 pills. Professor Murdoch was getting more impatient by the minute. You couldn't imagine her grief and suffering over the past few days. She'd even considered ending it all. But she managed to get through it, hoping that Kevin would be able to help her. I'm really not sure that's a good idea while you're still in this state of mind. Kevin had a pretty good idea what she would do if he gave her the other meds. Preparing an elevation pill was easy for him, and the herbs and other ingredients weren't very rare, but they were a little bizarre. But if he gave her the other 2 pills she needed, would she take them too soon? That could be disastrous. Professor Murdoch realized she'd screwed up. She took several deep breaths to calm her mood. Then she gulped and said, Kevin, you can rest assured that I'll follow your instructions and just take 1 pill every 2 days. So it's okay for you to give me the remaining 2 doses. Are you sure, Professor? Kevin hesitated for a moment and then reached into his pocket to pull out the vial containing the last 2 pills and poured them into his palm. As usual, Professor Murdoch completely ignored Kevin's warnings and quickly downed the rest of the elevation pills before he had a chance to react. If you don't have anything else to do, you'd better go back to the classroom before your classmates start to wonder what's going on. Professor Murdoch gestured toward the door. All she could think about right now was regaining her strength. At that very moment, the Williams family mansion in New York City was filled with lilies and carnations. Everyone was dressed in black with very sad faces in their eyes, and the air was heavy with grief. Randall Williams, the Williams family patriarch and the last remaining family member of his generation, had suddenly died during the night at the age of 76. Once the news got out, there was an endless stream of people coming to their home to express their condolences. Almost all the dignitaries in New York City stopped by to pay their respects as he lay in state in the mansion's main room. Thomas Williams knelt down on the floor and prayed for his father. One of the visitors stepped up and patted Thomas on the shoulder. She asked in disbelief, "How did Grandpa Williams die so suddenly?" Laura Williams, Thomas's wife, quickly stood up and said aloud, "What do you mean by that? My husband had nothing to do with his father's death. It's all Kevin's fault." The woman stared at Laura and asked her, "What are you talking about? Didn't Kevin escape the day before yesterday with his friend Dalton, who'd been seriously injured?" "Only because Grandpa wasn't willing to let him die in the hospital after the fight in the hospital room," Laura replied while wiping the tears from her face. While they talked, a steady stream of people walked through the room to pay their condolences. "But didn't Randall Williams love Kevin the most out of all his grandchildren?" one of them asked. "So he betrayed the family, stole from them, fought with his grandfather, and now he did this?" another visitor commented. "Is what she said true?" The woman who was standing next to Thomas was angrier than she'd ever been in her entire life. "Yes, it's true," Thomas replied sorrowfully without turning his head. All of a sudden there was a loud noise in the room. The woman stamped her foot heavily on the floor, breaking the marble tiles and making a deep hole. "I swear in front of Randall Williams' corpse that I'll kill Kevin Williams and put his head on a spike. I swear it with my very life." Ariana Titus's voice echoed through the entire room, and they could even hear her outside the mansion. The Williams family members who heard her thought it was a good thing that Grandpa had joined the Marriotts. Even though he was gone, they would still have protection. The mourners chatted with each other quietly. They all had sad looks in their eyes. Half of the people there had come to see how the Williams family was doing after their great loss. Randall's passing would have repercussions far beyond the limits of New York City. He'd done a lot over the years and touched many lives. But with him gone, there were going to be a lot of changes in the family. But nobody expected the family to be so well protected. Ariana's outburst of grief and anger had really boosted the family's morale. All of a sudden, everyone heard a phone ring. They turned around to see who it was, and Officer Emmett was taking out her cell phone. It was Kelly's mentor with the union. She started talking as soon as she answered the phone. "Thanks for calling back. There's something I want to confirm with you." "What's going on, Kelly? Have you had a setback?" her mentor asked hesitantly. Kelly had told her that she'd been able to find a power pill to help her break through her plateau in training. "Didn't I promise I'd be able to get you a power pill? But as soon as Kevin heard that I was asking for you, his attitude changed. So I'm wondering if you've had any run-ins with him in the past." Her tone was very respectful. After all, her mentor had a far higher rank than she did in the organization. Kelly's mentor was very distressed to hear this. "Are you telling me that you asked Kevin Williams for the power pill? Never mention that bastard's name to me again." She was absolutely livid. "Listen to me right now, Kelly. No matter what your relationship with him is, you need to break it off immediately. Now I have to report this to our leader. There's very bad blood between Kevin and our organization." "Why is that?" Kelly was a little confused about what to do and didn't respond for a moment. "If I cut off contact with him, what about your medication?" "As long as it's made by Kevin, never mind. I wouldn't take anything from him. Just the thought of it makes me feel dirty." Then she hung up angrily. After the call ended, Kelly stood there quietly trying to understand what was going on. What exactly happened between my mentor and Kevin? This was the biggest question in her mind at the moment. It seemed to Kelly that Kevin had stepped forward several times during various crises, and she understood how valuable a power pill was. Kevin had actually given her 2 of them and would have given her more, but apparently not for her mentor. But why was her mentor saying so many horrible things about Kevin? Meanwhile, Kevin had just gotten back from Professor Murdoch's office. Several students were whispering to each other and looking at him furtively. "What's going on?" Kevin scratched the back of his head and wondered what was up. It seemed that all of his classmates were giving him the once-over, and it made him feel a little uncomfortable.
"Get over here quick, Kevin."
Dalton was a little anxious. "What's going on here?" Kevin frowned as he sat down next to his friend.
"You should see this. I didn't know you had so much luck with the ladies."
Dalton handed Kevin his phone and showed him the photo on the screen. Kevin was stunned by what he saw. There was a photo of a man and a woman standing very close to each other. The way they were positioned, they seemed to be a loving couple about to kiss. The woman was very beautiful, and you could tell by her clothing that she wasn't an ordinary person. But the man in the photo was obviously Kevin. Standing next to the couple, you could clearly see Penny Sutherland. Kevin could tell that the photo had been taken at Brenda's beauty salon, and it had somehow been posted on the school's website. "So, Kevin, it looks like you're a real ladies' man. Impressive. I didn't know you had it in you," Lionel joked.
"Hey, Kevin, who's the woman in the photo? How do you know each other? Give us all the gory details."
Luther followed suit.
"It must be photoshopped or something. Otherwise, I don't know how you could ever get a woman to look like that."
Mike couldn't help opening his big mouth and joining in the fun at Kevin's expense. All of Kevin's classmates started whispering to each other and pointing at him.
"Are you asking for it?"
Dalton rolled up his sleeves as he glared angrily at Mike. Kevin didn't care what any of those boneheads thought. He looked over at Penny, who was also puzzled by the photo. Kevin was trying to figure out who could have taken the photo and then posted it. Needless to say, he was completely innocent, but aside from Penny, the only people there that day were her friends. It must have been posted through Penny's account. Because Kevin hadn't spoken up and because the whole class was watching, Mike got some of his confidence back.
"What do you mean, Dalton? Kevin doesn't seem to be denying it, so it must be true. Do you know what else is true? If you don't shut up, I'm going to knock out all of your teeth and put them in my pocket."
Dalton had enough of Mike's bullying. His temper flared and his fists looked like giant hammers, ready to pound Mike through the floor. All of a sudden, Mike lost his confidence and sat back down. He was in no mood to face Dalton. "Can you explain this to me, Penny?" Kevin managed to ask her calmly, but he was getting angry at Mike and his friends, and he resisted the impulse to flatten them. "Would you believe me if I told you I have no idea what's going on?" Penny looked genuinely upset. Well, if it wasn't you, it must be one of your friends. Kevin had a ferocious look in his eyes. I really don't know who it was, but I'll find out. Penny got up and quickly walked out of the classroom. It seemed that she didn't want to continue talking to Kevin about it. But then Kevin realized he'd better go find Lily before she saw the photo. When Kevin got back to the classroom from Professor Murdoch's office, everyone was giving him funny looks. He found out that someone had posted a photo of him in one of Penny's friends on the school's website. Penny had no idea who'd done it. Dalton had calmed down and was no longer going to pound Mike into the floor, but he was very concerned that Kevin's marriage would be ruined by the scandalous photo. He whispered to his buddy,
Kevin, if your wife sees that photo, you'll be in big trouble. I think you should go see her right after class.
Kevin nodded his head and quickly left the classroom. He didn't know what Lily would think when she saw that picture. His temper flared as soon as he got to the door of Lily's classroom. Frank Carter, who had nearly started a fight with Kevin on the martial arts training field, was harassing Lily, holding her hand and smiling. Carter, what's the matter with you? How dare you come on to my wife? Kevin roared angrily as he flew over to him and punched him in the chest, sending him sprawling on the floor. Honey, Lily immediately ran over to Kevin and gave him a tight hug. Don't you care that she's married? Kevin glared at Carter, who was getting up from the floor. What kind of teacher are you? You've got some nerve hitting me. As Lily's teacher, I have to look out for her welfare. Carter rubbed his chest where Kevin had punched him and said, You're a real son of a bitch. The only reason I didn't wipe the floor with you last time was that Professor Murdoch was watching. Do you want to try again today? It's a good thing for you that the professor showed up last time. You'd have gotten the beating of your life. Kevin wasn't afraid of Carter at all. His eyes burned right through him. You're such a loser. If you were looking for trouble, you found it, Carter sneered. He put up his fists, ready to fight. I think you've made a mistake. It looks like the trouble's found you, Kevin replied sarcastically. You're dead meat. Carter was so angry his entire body was shaking. More and more students were watching them, and the corridor outside the classroom was packed. One of them called out, Look, Lily's husband is challenging Mr. Carter to a fight. They knew that Carter was a well-trained martial artist, and they expected him to win hands down. The noise in the hallway was deafening as the students got excited about the confrontation. They were acting like the crowd at a wrestling match. Seeing that things were getting worse, Lily stepped in front of Kevin and tried to calm things down. Mr. Carter, my husband didn't mean to upset you. Please don't be angry with him. Can you let him go this time? Lily, your husband was incredibly disrespectful to me. School regulations forbid students to fight, especially against faculty. Everyone saw Kevin strike me first. No court in the land would convict me for defending myself. Carter's eyes fixed on Kevin, and the more he looked, the more angry he got. Mr. Carter, my husband can be impulsive sometimes. Lily was very happy that Kevin was willing to fight for her, but she didn't want him to do battle with someone as dangerous as Frank Carter. If Kevin got beaten up by him, he might be scarred for life. But Kevin was really angry with Carter. I'm not impulsive. If you're a real man, you'll fight with me out on the martial arts field right this second. This has to be settled once and for all. Kevin was trying to goad Carter into fighting with him so he'd stop hitting on Lily. Kevin, what the heck are you doing? How can you win against Mr. Carter? Lily was really worried that her husband would get seriously injured. The students who were watching them started to laugh and mocked Kevin. This dumbass has really bitten off more than he could chew, one of them shouted. They all thought that Carter would take Kevin out with one punch, but they still wanted to watch. Carter got a bloodthirsty look in his eyes. One thing's for sure, you're good at bragging. Nobody's talked crap like this to me in years. Without waiting for Kevin to answer, Carter accepted his challenge. Since you want to get beaten up, I'll be happy to oblige. Let's meet on the martial arts training ground. Don't be afraid to come. Then Carter turned around and strode out of the building. Honey, what are you doing?
This is the School for Healing Arts. You can't do something like this here. Lily anxiously advised Kevin to call it off. Listen to me, please. Just head back to your class, okay? As long as Professor Murdoch is on your side, Carter won't dare to do anything to you.
Don't worry about me, Lily. I've got to set things straight with Carter so he won't bother you anymore. Kevin had a very resolute look on his face. He gently patted Lily on the head and quickly walked out to go to the martial arts field. Lily stamped her feet on the floor in frustration. Suddenly it occurred to her that she could get help from Professor Murdoch, and she ran over to the faculty office building. The news that Kevin was going to fight with Frank Carter soon spread all over the campus, and hundreds of students were gathered on the martial arts field. Of course, 90% of them thought that Kevin would lose miserably. At the same time, some of them felt pity for Kevin. There was a good chance he'd end up in the hospital. Kevin, you're just a student, so nobody's expecting you to win. Why don't you just apologize to me now and I'll let you go? Carter sneered arrogantly. But Kevin sneered right back at him. Carter, I think you're a little too sure of yourself. You're a bully and a loudmouth. If you want an apology, you're going to have to beat it out of me. Well, just remember I was going to let you off with an apology. But now it's game on. Carter immediately squared off in front of Kevin, ready to fight hand-to-hand. Kevin squinted at Carter, then he shrugged his shoulders and cracked his neck. The crowd went wild in anticipation of the fight. The students couldn't believe that Kevin had the guts to challenge the school's martial arts instructor. But most of them were cheering for Carter to toss Kevin on the spot. Just as Carter raised his fist to throw a punch at Kevin, there was a loud shout that could be heard across the entire field. Stop that right now! Mr. Carter! Why are you fighting with a student? Then Professor Murdoch and Lily squeezed through the crowd and walked up to the two of them. Professor Murdoch, your student has provoked me over and over. If I don't set him straight, how can I maintain discipline in any of my training courses? Carter had an extremely nasty look on his face. No matter what Kevin has done, you're the teacher. How can you be so narrow-minded? The professor put him in his place and reminded him of his duty as an instructor. But he has absolutely no respect for teachers. Carter really didn't want to let Kevin go this time. Then Lily trotted up to her husband. Are you okay, sweetie? What are you doing here? The expression on Kevin's face quickly softened when he saw her. Just go over there where it's safe, with Professor Murdoch. After I deal with this, we can go home and have a nice dinner. Professor Murdoch was about to smile, but controlled herself so that nobody would think that she wasn't taking this seriously. Mr. Carter, how do you want to deal with this issue? Professor Murdoch wasn't going to beat around the bush any longer. Carter replied arrogantly as he lifted his chin up and smirked. There's a simple solution. Let your student make a public apology to me right here, right now. Then when you see me on campus in the future, you'll stay out of my way. Without waiting for Professor Murdoch to speak, Kevin told Carter what he thought of his idea. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Let's just fight. I'm getting tired of all this trash talking. How dare you interrupt me while I'm talking to your teacher? Carter roared loudly at Kevin. What are you doing, Kevin? Lily shook his arm impatiently. The onlookers started shaking their heads. It looked like Kevin had lucked out when Professor Murdoch showed up. Otherwise, Carter probably would have beaten him to a pulp. Isn't there going to be a fight? A lot of the students were very disappointed. You're asking for too much, Mr. Carter. Professor Murdoch was getting very flustered. But she was actually afraid that Kevin was going to beat up Carter. Professor Murdoch had only recovered a third of her strength, so she didn't have a chance of stopping Kevin if he took things too far. Too much? I don't think that's too much at all. Carter shouted at the professor. If you want to fight, Carter, let's get started. If you don't want to fight me, then get the hell out of here. Are we going to stand around all day talking? Kevin really didn't want to waste any more time with him. Carter got a fierce look in his eyes. Excellent. I've never met anyone who was in a hurry to get beaten up. A lot of the onlookers were eager to see Carter take Kevin out. After all, hadn't he been asking for it? Lily, please stand a little farther away. I'm afraid you might get hurt. Carter took a deep breath as he prepared to finally take a swing at Kevin. "He's right, Lily. You'd better stay away from us. If you're too close, I'll have to hold back." Kevin gently guided Lily to stand next to Professor Murdoch. "Okay, Carter, let's get going." Kevin grinned at him confidently. "That's it. Nothing can save you now." Carter roared as he leapt at Kevin and punched at his throat. A lot of the students were surprised by his speed. Lily was too squeamish to watch. She quickly turned her head and covered her eyes with her hands. She couldn't bear to see Kevin get hurt. Phoebe was making a fist, secretly praying that Kevin could avoid the blow. Even so, Penny was much calmer than the other people who were watching. She could tell that Kevin wasn't panicking at all. Not only was he confident, but he also had a smile on his lips. What is he laughing at? Penny wondered. A moment later, she saw why Kevin had been so confident. Even though Carter was quick, Kevin was quicker. As Carter stepped in to punch, Kevin easily avoided him. You could barely follow him with your eyes as he sidestepped the punch and countered to Carter's ribs and then his temple. "Too slow. You're much too slow." Kevin slapped Carter on the cheek and moved out of reach before the poor bastard had a chance to touch him. All Carter saw was a blur that he couldn't seem to reach. He kept readjusting, trying to find an opening, but he just couldn't find one. The crowd let out a collective gasp. They then held their breath as Carter ran at Kevin, who then threw him at least 10 feet in the other direction. They were all wondering how this guy they usually treated like a loser could be so strong. Carter was starting to panic. Nobody had ever handled him so easily, not even in professional competitions. Professor Murdoch was also staring at Kevin in disbelief. She knew that Carter was famous for his speed. Was he actually too slow for Kevin? "I'll tell you what, Carter. Out of respect for you because you're a teacher, you can take 3 punches at me." Kevin stood calmly in front of him, looking like an expert with far more years of experience than he actually had. "Don't be so cocky," Sherwin Blair yelled. "Don't let him win, Mr. Carter," Mike shouted in encouragement. But Carter had reached his limit and knew he had to resort to cheating. His reputation was on the line. By offering to let him take 3 punches, Kevin was really insulting his skill and his experience. Carter took a deep breath and kicked right at Kevin's head. Most people would have been knocked unconscious by a move like that. Lily and Phoebe both let out a cry. They didn't think Kevin would react in time. Most of the students expected to see Kevin lying unconscious on the ground. Then suddenly Carter pulled a knife out of his belt and stabbed Kevin. But the blade didn't touch him. It cut his shirt, but it seemed to be stopped before it went through his skin. How could this be? Carter wondered. The entire field, which by now had hundreds of spectators, fell into a deep silence as they all looked at Kevin in disbelief. "You've got one last chance," Kevin sneered. "You're dead," Carter growled. He made a giant leap and stabbed Kevin's shoulder. You could hear the knife cut through the air, but when it hit Kevin's shoulder, the blade snapped off and fell to the ground. Kevin quickly countered with a palm to Carter's left shoulder. Carter went cartwheeling through the air and struck several of the onlookers, knocking them to the ground. What kind of armor is he wearing? Penny frowned as she watched in amazement. Kevin was really grateful for the Alliance leader's gift. "I'd say you're out of chances, Carter. Now it's my turn." After Kevin said this, he hit him like a freight train. Carter had the wind knocked out of him. As he lay on the ground, Kevin put his foot on his chest. "Stop it, Kevin! You're hurting our martial arts instructor!" Blair shouted desperately. "I'll report you for this and have you kicked out of school." Mike saw his chance to look good in front of the crowd. "Get off of me! This is intolerable!" Carter's face was starting to swell up, and you could barely tell what he was saying. How could he ever live this down? Imagine a teacher being beaten this badly by a first-year student. But Kevin didn't listen to him. "Somebody save me! Get this madman off of me!" By now, Carter could barely breathe. Some of the students began to move in to help their teacher. How would Kevin stop them all without getting himself expelled? Kevin's secret is exposed. Kevin had just beaten the school's martial arts instructor, Frank Carter, outside on the practice field, with Professor Murdoch and half the school watching. The match wasn't even close, and it was an embarrassing defeat for Carter. Several students who really liked Carter rushed towards Kevin, who was standing there with his foot on his opponent's chest. "How dare you treat our instructor like this?" one of them screamed. Kevin turned and threw them one by one as they attacked, barely moving his own body. The students were flung about in all directions and lay there on the ground wondering what had just happened. "Try that again and I'll break your legs." Kevin pressed his foot down on Carter's ribs and you could hear a couple of them crack. It was pretty impressive to everyone who was watching. They started to see that Kevin might not be so useless after all. Phoebe was also starting to see Kevin a little differently after this. "Will you admit you were wrong?" Kevin looked down at Carter and smirked. "I'll never give up." Carter stared at Kevin maliciously. "Listen to me, you bastard. You'd better kill me now or I'll come back and kill you later." "I simply asked if you were wrong." Kevin roared loudly as he pressed his foot harder on Carter's chest. Frank Carter felt as if his internal organs were being flattened. But how could he give in to Kevin in front of almost all the students in the school? "Just say you were wrong and I'll let you go." Kevin pressed on Carter's ribs even harder. Blood started to seep out of Carter's mouth, but he kept clenching his teeth and didn't say a word. "Honey, please stop. If you push down any harder, Mr. Carter may not be able to survive." Lily quickly ran to Kevin to persuade him to show some mercy. "I asked you if you were wrong." Kevin didn't pay attention to Lily and applied a little more pressure. Almost everyone there heard a series of loud clicks that sounded like firecrackers. Carter opened his mouth and screamed in agony. Kevin had broken the rest of his ribs. "I give in. I admit I was wrong. Please stop," he cried out desperately. "Now that we've gotten that out of the way, why don't you apologize to my wife?" Kevin ordered him calmly. I'll apologize, but can you please let me do it from down here? I don't think I can stand up." Frank Carter pleaded so quietly you could barely hear him. Lily hurried over and tugged on Kevin's sleeve. "Forget about it, honey. I'm not that angry with him anymore. As long as he stops harassing me, that'll be fine." But Kevin was still pretty pissed at the guy. "Did you hear what my wife said, Carter?" Kevin sneered at the defeated man as he put his hand on Lily's shoulder. "Okay, I promise that I'll never bother Lily again." Even though Carter was trying to look compliant, you could see the venom in his eyes. Just as Kevin was about to reply, everyone heard a loud whooshing noise and a large shadow flew over them. "Is that a Bell 525? Kevin was startled for a moment as he admired the luxury helicopter that's nicknamed the Relentless. As the chopper descended, the crowd dispersed underneath it, clearing a space for it to land. A thin figure stepped out, gazing around at the enormous crowd. The man's eyes fell on Carter, who was barely recognizable in his current condition. "Who's responsible for this unauthorized gathering? Don't you know the college's rules and regulations?" He was quite old and his voice was a little hoarse. "Vice President Shepard, to what do we owe the pleasure?" Professor Murdoch stepped forward and approached him uneasily. She knew the elderly gentleman. Harley Shepard was the vice president of the Chicago branch of the School for the Healing Arts. He was also heavily involved in physical and martial development and had been an enforcer many years ago. "What are you doing here, Professor Murdoch?" Shepard said softly. "It seems to me that the school's faculty has been slacking off lately. You and Mr. Carter obviously can't control the students." "Vice President Shepard, you may have misunderstood." Professor Murdoch wanted to explain, but she didn't know how to do it. All of a sudden, Sherwin Blair stepped forward and spoke to Mr. Shepard. "Sir, I want to report to you that Kevin has been disrespectful. He beat his instructor for no reason at all and injured several students in the process. Mike also stepped up to denounce Kevin. Vice President Shepard, as student leader, I request that you severely punish Kevin Williams. A terrible influence like him shouldn't be allowed to stay in this school.
Oh, really?
Shepard slightly turned his head to look at Kevin.
Are they talking about you?
Kevin had advanced enough in his training to recognize someone whose development was far superior to his own. His body shivered for a moment. Yes, they are. Kevin, who had recovered from his surprise, answered plainly and directly. He thought that if the school's vice president only believed one side of the story and didn't try to look for the truth, then the school was doomed anyway, and it didn't matter if he got thrown out.
That's interesting.
Shepard's eyes flashed a look of surprise.
It's rare for someone to be so accomplished at such a young age.
Don't worry, sir. I'll take care of this matter, Professor Murdoch reassured the vice president. Even though the professor had a very high rank in the Union, she still had to be very polite to Shepard.
No, that won't be necessary. Mr. Carter has already been fined and placed on suspension for similar actions in the past, Shepard explained. I'll handle this.
Yes, sir. How could Carter argue with him? He had to bite the bullet and accept his punishment.
As for you, Kevin, come with me.
Shepard turned toward the faculty office building and started to head there without giving any further explanation. Kevin! Lily was worried about what would happen to him. Don't be afraid, honey. I'll go and have a chat with the vice president. Kevin patted her shoulder lovingly. Just head back to class. Wait for me in the parking lot after school and we'll go shopping together. Good idea. Lily nodded enthusiastically. Professor Murdoch left with Kevin, and then the crowd broke up as the students left one after another. Vice President Shepard's office was on the 7th floor. When Kevin and Professor Murdoch arrived, he was sitting behind his desk holding a book.
Professor Murdoch, please head back to your office. I'll let you know if I need anything from you.
Shepard gestured politely toward the door. Vice President. She really wanted to say something to help Kevin.
What's the matter? Are you afraid that I'll bully one of your students?
Shepard joked as he gave her a disarming smile. Yes, sir, as you wish. Professor Murdoch wasn't in the mood to tangle with him. She took a long look at Kevin and quickly left the office. In an instant, the room was quiet. Kevin was looking at Harley Shepard and decided that there was nothing unusual about him. He didn't look any different than any ordinary elderly man. But Kevin knew very well that someone like Harley Shepard was a lot like his mentor, the Night King. You had no idea what they were capable of just by looking at them. That was the worst kind of opponent.
Are you the same Kevin Williams who was thrown out of the New York City Williams family a few years ago for colluding with outsiders and stealing family funds? And the same one who's got a reputation as the good-for-nothing son-in-law of the Jones family in Chicago?
Shepard said slowly. Did you bring me here just to insult me? Kevin's expression was very serious. He didn't know why Shepard had dredged up all those lies.
Don't forget that the school investigated everyone's family background before admission. That was announced on the first day of classes.
Having said that, Shepard suddenly got up and took a file from his desk and handed it to Kevin.
But I recently did some investigation of my own and found out some interesting things about you.
Kevin opened the folder and he was stunned by what he saw. Shepard explained what was in the file.
Over the last 3 months, your behavior has suddenly become quite mysterious. You're in the habit of spending tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. You have contacts with notable personalities like Mitchell Cook and Gilbert Rhodes in Chicago, and you even went to prison where you socialize with members of the Alliance and the Myriads.
Shepard slowly walked behind Kevin's chair and patted him on the shoulder.
Some time ago, you donated tens of millions to the disaster fund, so the school gave you special permission to enter the library. You may not know it, but I'm usually on the 13th floor.
When Kevin heard this, his eyes grew wide. He knew that there were many master herbalists and other advanced practitioners in the library, but he would never have expected that Harley Shepard was one of them.
You chose a book on developing cardiac power. That's really something you could have developed through regular practice. It was an unusual choice, so I'm very curious about one thing. There are so many precious resources in the library. Why didn't you choose one of the others?
Shepard's tone was relaxed and empathetic, the kind of voice that made you trust him. It's okay if you get directly to the point with me, sir. Kevin was already starting to panic now that he knew that his relationship with the Alliance and the Myriads was no longer a complete secret. Shepard smiled and continued to talk as he walked around his office and absently straightened some books on his shelves.
Don't worry. I'm just chatting with you casually. I've thought of a couple of possibilities. One is that you entered the school with some unknown purpose. To tell you the truth, you've already moved far beyond anything we can offer you here. The only thing that comes to mind is that you're interested in the consolidation technique. So when you went to the library's special collections section that day, you had a specific goal in mind, but because of the time constraints, you couldn't find it. You had to pick something so that nobody would be suspicious, so you grabbed a random book to take with you.
Then Shepard added with a smile,
Tell me, son, who's your mentor? Is he with the Alliance or the Myriads?
That's not very funny, sir. Kevin protested a little.
Really? But I think it's funny.
Then Shepard said,
Nadia Alexander told me a few days ago that she wanted to send you to the Herbalist Society as a special student.
Would you let me go there? Kevin didn't seem nervous at all. He knew exactly what Shepard meant by his comment.
Of course not. In the past 50 years, the Herbalist Society has attracted too many fine young talents. You've already shown incredible promise. As a senior member of the faculty, I wouldn't let you go easily,
Shepard replied candidly. Is the school's dean in today? Kevin asked casually.
Why are you interested in the dean?
Shepard looked at Kevin with curiosity but couldn't figure out what he had in mind. Everyone knows about the dean's great accomplishments. If I could see him, that would help a lot, Kevin replied with a smile.
Unfortunately, the dean is out of town and won't be back for another month.
Shepard put his hands behind his back and walked over to the window. When Kevin left and closed the door, Shepard's face softened into a thoughtful smile.
It's a pity that I didn't become his mentor first.
The vice president shook his head and sighed. When he got outside, Kevin took a deep, long breath and realized that his clothes were soaked with sweat. He could feel his pulse quickening. Kevin returned to the classroom and ignored everyone's curious glances as he played with his cell phone under his desk. He was confident that he wouldn't get in any trouble for it this time. Professor Murdoch had just taken her elevation pills, so she wouldn't be too strict with him. When classes were finally over for the day, Kevin went to the parking lot. Lily had been waiting for him for 5 minutes. Are you worried? Kevin asked gently. The vice president didn't give you too much trouble, did he? Lily said worriedly. He just chewed me out a little. Not too much trouble, Kevin said with a smile. Let's catch a bus and head down to the farmer's market. Lily nodded and got on the bus with Kevin. An hour later, they hopped off at the outdoor market down the street from the condo. Kevin got a few dollars worth of potatoes, some greens, and a few tomatoes and fresh fruit. Lily watched him with an odd expression on her face as he bargained with the salespeople to get the best price he could. Kevin, I had no idea you could bargain so well, Lily remarked as he walked over to her with several bags of produce. Well, I spent a lot of time shopping for groceries for you and your mother. Kevin puffed himself up like he was bragging and gave her a big grin. Lily's eyes started to well up with tears and she murmured, I'm sorry I didn't treat you too well back then. It was wrong not to show you I cared. It's all right, Lily. That's all in the past. We need to live in the present and look forward to the future. Next time, I'll really impress you and get them to pay me to take their fruit. Kevin made a joke to lighten the atmosphere a little. Oh, Kevin. Lily hugged her husband around the neck and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. "Just for that, I'm going to cook you a delicious meal tonight," he replied. Then the two of them walked the rest of the way to the building. For the rest of the week, Lily and Kevin spent a lot of time with each other. They went to the farmer's market, cooked, even did housework together. After all the troubles they'd seen, it was a good change to spend such a pleasant week together. But would it last?
The following weekend, Kevin and Lily were tidying up the apartment when suddenly the doorbell rang. "Honey, go see who it is, would you?" Lily wiped the sweat from her forehead. "No problem." Kevin didn't even bother to put down his mop on the way to the door. "Who is it, honey?" Lily asked from the other room. "Hey, bro, I'm back," the woman said to Kevin with a slight smile. She gave off a smart, energetic vibe as she stood there chewing a piece of gum. She was wearing a short-sleeved blouse and a white coat with a pair of tight jeans that showed off her figure. "My God, what are you doing here?" Kevin said as he quickly backed away from her. "Is that any way to talk to your favorite cousin? Don't you want me to visit you in your new digs? Let me give my little sister a hug." Then she opened her arms wide. She was Nicole Jones, Lily's cousin. She wasn't a native of Chicago, but from time to time she stopped in to visit Lily for a few days. Nicole could be a little carefree at times, but she never took a dislike to Kevin. Whenever she came to town, she teased Kevin so much that she couldn't stop laughing. But Kevin let her ribbing roll right off his back because she was never malicious. "What are you doing here, Nicole?" Lily was also very surprised when she got to the door and saw her cousin. "You mean I'm not welcome here? I'm not intruding, am I?" Nicole hugged Lily and patted her on the back. "You seem to be getting better and better every time I see you. Kevin must be taking good care of you." Her emphasis on the word care made Lily blush, and it made Kevin feel a little embarrassed too. Everything Nicole said seemed to have a double meaning. Kevin had been married to Lily for more than 3 years, and he wanted to take care of Lily the way Nicole implied, but they just hadn't had the chance. "Don't tease me, Nicole." Lily lowered her head shyly. "Why should you be shy when you're both married?" Nicole saw through Lily's little secret. Then she changed the subject. "Have you missed your big sister? It's really been such a long time. Kevin can sleep in another room and we'll spend the night gossiping and catching up, just like old times." Before Lily could agree, Kevin jumped in and said, "No way. It's either that or I'll sleep in your room. Don't worry, I won't mind. Besides, it's not like I haven't seen your body before." Nicole joked as she laughed loudly. When Kevin heard this, he suddenly felt incredibly self-conscious. Nicole was talking about something that happened just after he and Lily got married. Kevin was taking a bath and didn't lock the door. Nicole was looking for Lily and went into the bathroom. When she opened the door, she saw Kevin buck naked. "Come on, Nicole, that's enough. You can sleep in my room tonight." Then Lily turned to Kevin and said, "Honey, is it okay if you sleep in the guest room?" "Oh, I don't mind. I'll let you two catch up with each other," Kevin replied considerately. Then he turned to Nicole and said, "Hey, what would you like to eat? I'll go get some takeout for us." Without waiting for her to answer, Kevin darted out the door. Who knows what else Nicole would say if he hung around and let her keep talking. About an hour later, Kevin came back with a load of gourmet food. As soon as he walked in, he could hear the sound of women whispering in the living room. Now Rachel had joined Lily and Nicole, and the three of them were sitting on the sofa making fun of each other like they usually did when they got together. About a half an hour after Kevin left, Rachel had gotten a call from Nicole and quickly rushed to her car after she finished something she was working on for the Salix Leaf Hotel. The impromptu party was in full swing, and Kevin felt a little out of place. "Hey, can you watch what you're throwing on the floor? I just vacuumed this morning." Kevin popped his head out of the kitchen to warn them. "Hey, is Kevin back?" Nicole asked as she gave him a crooked smile. When Rachel saw Kevin, she quickly got up from the sofa and said hi. Her attitude was a lot different after he hired her to manage the complex. "I've come all the way to Chicago and you don't even cook for me? Let's see what kind of takeout you've got." Nicole patted her stomach. I'm starving." "Come and see. Is this good enough for you?" Kevin proudly pointed to the spread on the kitchen counter. "Well, let me see if I approve," Nicole joked as she trotted into the kitchen. Seeing Nicole and Kevin teasing each other like that made Rachel and Lily start laughing. Nicole and Kevin weren't sure if they were enemies or just didn't agree on things. Anyway, once they got together, they always argued, and Kevin usually lost the argument. After she saw the lobster, steak, salads, desserts, and other delicious choices in the kitchen, Nicole was stunned. "What's wrong? Don't you like what I brought back?" Kevin lifted his chin a little and smiled broadly. He was sure he'd won this battle. "Kevin, are you nuts? How much did this meal cost? We could have just had burgers and fries. This is way too extravagant. When Aunt Dorothy gets back, she's going to let you have it." Nicole had never been very diplomatic. As far as she knew, Kevin didn't have a lot of money and not much social status. This meal had to cost a fortune. Dorothy was bound to get angry with him. "It doesn't matter. Nicole, you can eat to your heart's content." Then Kevin gave her a reassuring look. Of course, he didn't go out and buy this stuff. He called Mitchell Cook and asked him to send some of his people from the hotel kitchen with a small banquet. It was fancy enough for a state dinner, let alone lunch. "Did you win the lottery or something?" Nicole reached out and put her palm on Kevin's forehead. "Nope, your temperature's normal. I guess you're not delirious." "Nicole, do you want to eat or not?" Kevin grumbled. "Hell yeah! Let me get my sisters." Nicole stopped teasing Kevin. She went back to the living room and picked up where they'd left off, arguing about movies, podcasts, whatever. When they finally sat down at the table, Nicole took a bite of her lobster and said, "Lily, I haven't been to Chicago in a really long time. Do you want to go shopping later?" "Sure, I can go with you, but Rachel is pretty famous now. If she goes out in the street, she may attract a crowd," Lily said a little jokingly. But actually, it was the truth. "Is that true, Rachel?" Nicole asked in surprise. "Of course it's true. Not only is Rachel the manager of the best hotel in Chicago, but she's also the most eligible young woman in the city." Lily passed Kevin a salad bowl and a fork. "Don't listen to Lily's nonsense, Nicole. I'm just a simple office worker." When Rachel said this, she glanced over at Kevin. He didn't seem to mind her saying that. "Since we can't go shopping, why don't we go out and do karaoke?" Nicole was always restless. If she spent the day cooped up, she'd feel miserable. "That's not a bad idea. Our hotel just opened a new karaoke bar that's getting really popular. I haven't tried it yet, but I heard it's great." Rachel was excited to go down there and take a look around. "Do you want to waste a beautiful day like this in a karaoke bar?" Kevin whispered. "I think you three might as well go shopping." "What do you mean, you three? Aren't you going too?" Nicole asked with a slight frown. "Honey, don't you want to go out with us?" Lily looked at Kevin and jokingly batted her eyelashes. "Come on, Kevin, let's all go out together. Otherwise, it'll be boring for you to stay at home all alone." Rachel also tried to persuade him. "Well, since you insist, I'll try my best to clear my social calendar." Kevin laughed as he took a bite of an eclair. A little over an hour later, Kevin was walking along with the three women on the street, attracting the attention of lots of people. The three women were very attractive and got a lot of envious looks, but Kevin looked out of place with them. As usual, he was dressed in crappy clothes and looked like he didn't belong. That attracted as much attention as Lily, Rachel, and Nicole. As soon as the four of them entered the mall, Nicole immediately got excited. "Wow, that looks like Flo Lambeau, the hottest new star in the country." "I heard that Flo recently signed a contract with Williams Media to hold 3 charity performances in Chicago," Rachel explained enthusiastically. "Kevin, let's go and see if we can't take a picture with her." Lily grabbed Kevin by the arm and dragged him towards the stage. Flo Lambeau was extremely popular and the shopping mall was packed. The four of them managed to get to the front row, but Nicole was pushed by someone and knocked down some of the props.
"What's the matter with you? Watch what you're doing."
2 burly security guards quickly came over and started giving her grief. Kevin started to frown when he heard them talking like that. Before he could say anything, Rachel had already stood up for Nicole. "What are you shouting about? It was an accident. Somebody bumped into her." Then she added, "And you should be a little more polite." The guard got a nasty look on his face and threatened, "If you keep making trouble, you're out of here." Rachel put her hands on her hips and snapped back, "No way." Just then, somebody interrupted them. "Rachel, when did you get here?" A well-dressed man quickly walked over to her. When the two security guards saw him, they greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Nassau." "Do I know you?" Rachel looked at him but couldn't quite place him. "How could you forget me, Rachel? I'm Chuck Nassau. We met when my family was working on the contract with the Salix Leaf Hotel." Chuck seemed practically excited to see her. His family had a production contract with Williams Media. As part of their deal, they got to arrange an informal concert at the mall. So Chuck was there to make sure that everything was going okay. "Oh, of course, Chuck Nassau. Sorry about that. I definitely remember you." Rachel was a little embarrassed for forgetting. Then Chuck turned to the security guards. "What just happened? How can you two be so rude to President Butler?" Suddenly, Nicole tugged on Rachel's sleeve. "Hey, can you do me a favor and let me take a picture with Flo Lambeau? I'm a big fan of hers." When Lily heard this, her eyes lit up. She wanted to get a photo too. Out of the four of them, Kevin was the least enthusiastic. The concert was beautiful and her singing was lovely, but since he took over Williams Media, Kevin had seen dozens of stars, and he'd stopped caring about autographs a long time ago. "Mr. Nassau, do you think you can help me?" Rachel asked with a smile. "For you, anything. It would be my pleasure." After Chuck replied with a laugh, he turned his head and glared at the two security guards. "What are you two still doing here? Do you want a tip?" The guards grumbled as they walked away. Just then, Flo finished her set and headed backstage for a wardrobe change. "Come with me." Chuck seized the opportunity to catch Flo when she had a free moment. He couldn't believe his luck running into Rachel here. If Chuck could make friends with her, it might help his entire family. Then someday he might climb the ladder in the family company. It would definitely be worth the effort to set up an impromptu meet and greet. "Hello, Miss Lambeau. I have some friends who would like to take a picture with you. Don't worry, they won't take up too much of your time," Chuck said with a smile. "Mr. Nassau, I hope you can understand this, but my visit is a contractual charity performance. There are no provisions to meet with any fans. Please send them away." Flo Lambeau didn't even look at Rachel. Nicole got a sour look on her face and Lily looked very embarrassed. "It would just be a quick photo," Chuck started to explain, but Flo cut him off. "I've made it very clear. Please leave at once and don't delay me. I have to go back on stage." Chuck turned around and smiled apologetically at Rachel and Lily. He hadn't expected Flo to be so uncooperative, but there wasn't anything more he could do. She was a big star and he couldn't force her, could he? Kevin, who hadn't opened his mouth yet, suddenly blurted out, "Is your time really that precious?" Everyone turned around and looked at him. After all, Flo Lambeau was a celebrity. Everybody was interested in setting up a photo with her. "Who are you?" she said impatiently. "If you still want to see the rest of my performance, you should go back and take your seats. If not, I'll have security show you the door." How stuck up can you be? Rachel couldn't believe that Flo was using this kind of tone with Kevin. "Mr. Nassau, please send them away. I don't want to see them again." Flo was in no mood to continue the discussion. Chuck was very depressed by her reaction. He didn't expect that things would turn out like this. On the one hand, she was a famous star, but on the other hand, Rachel was very influential in Chicago. Chuck was caught between a rock and a hard place and had no idea what to do. "I wouldn't be so stuck up if I were you. If my wife and her friends hadn't asked to take some photos with you, we wouldn't even be here. I'd rather be in the mall having a hot dog." Kevin really let her have it. But since Flo didn't know who Kevin was, she didn't really care what he thought. That was about to change. The onlookers were furious to hear Kevin talk to her like that. Who is this kid? The way he's dressed, he shouldn't even go out in public. They were ready to drag Kevin out and throw him into the street. Flo Lambeau was also infuriated by Kevin's insulting tone. Mr. Nassau, I hope you can give me an explanation for this intrusion. Chuck got a panicked look on his face. He really didn't want to make a bad impression on Rachel. Suddenly someone shouted, "Hey, that's the guy who's been mooching off the Jones family." This really got the crowd going. They all started calling Kevin names and threatening to beat him up. Not that he couldn't have handled them, of course. That's when Chuck suddenly realized that he'd heard that Rachel was friends with Lily, who was a member of the Jones family. He figured that Kevin was just trying to show off because he was one of Rachel's acquaintances. Chuck thought that maybe he could turn this to his advantage and save the situation. Suddenly, Nicole turned around and shouted at the rowdy fans, "What are you all yelling about? You don't know anything about him." As far as Nicole was concerned, even though Kevin didn't have much potential, he'd always been very good to Lily, Dorothy, and her. So Nicole absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to insult Kevin in front of her. Chuck struggled to apologize to Rachel. "I'm sorry, but this is all my fault. But could you please ask your friends to restrain themselves? After all, this is a public place and Flo is a well-known celebrity. She doesn't have time to talk with any Tom, Dick, or Harry who walks in off the street." "Come on. If she'd just said yes, we would have been done by now. It's taken her longer to argue with us than it would have to snap a quick photo," Nicole retorted as she took Lily and Kevin by the hand and started to walk away. Even though she was ready to give up, you could see the disappointment in Nicole's eyes. As they were leaving, they could hear Flo grumbling about Kevin's rudeness. "Don't be angry, Miss Lambeau. He's not worth getting angry over." Chuck quickly smiled and tried to pacify her. Kevin immediately stopped in his tracks when he heard that. He turned around and gave Flo a cold stare. "What did you just say? I'd like to hear you repeat that." "Do you really want to hear it again? You're just a nobody and you'll never amount to anything." Now that Flo Lambeau thought she knew something about Kevin, she wasn't worried about his reaction. "You're a piece of crap. Just because you're here with Rachel doesn't mean anything to me. If you mess with me, you'll see what I do to you." Chuck snarled as he looked over at Kevin. "You two are a real class act," Kevin replied to him. "If you don't apologize right this second, this concert is over." "You've got some nerve talking to me like that." Chuck was so angry his lips were quivering and you could see a vein popping out on his forehead. "I'll have security remove you from the property." "Don't you dare!" Rachel took a step forward to protect Kevin and the others. "I'm the general manager of the property and you'll do no such thing." Rachel was angrier than she'd ever been in her life. The onlookers had no idea who she was and started to whisper to each other. "My God, is she really the general manager of the Salix Leaf Hotel?" They also knew from all the reports in social media that she was backed by a mysterious but powerful figure. No wonder Kevin had been so snippy with Flo. He knew that he could get away with his behavior because of his friend's ties. The security guard decided to wait and see how it would play out rather than risk taking the wrong side. Chuck was also stunned. He never expected Rachel to speak up for Kevin like that. Now he had to figure out how to apologize to her. "Kevin, Rachel, let's get going," Lily said very sensibly. "That's right. We don't want to take any crummy pictures anyway. And I won't be going to any more Flo Lambeau movies either. Someone like her doesn't deserve to be a star." Nicole was no longer Flo's biggest fan. Kevin was determined to teach Flo a lesson, and with his connections at Williams Media, he could do it. As the saying goes, one bad apple spoils the bunch. Williams Media couldn't risk their reputation with someone like her, and they'd find a new star right away anyhow. "I don't deserve to be a star? Who the hell do you think you are? I wouldn't take a picture with you if you got down on your knees and begged me." Flo was so mad she started to huff and puff while she was talking. "Well, I guess I'll have to show you who I am." Kevin took out his cell phone and called Miss Wilson at Williams Media. Miss Wilson answered in her usual professional tone of voice. "What can I do for you, Mr. President?" "What's our company's relationship with Flo Lambeau?" Kevin asked directly. "She's made 2 films this past year, and both of them were funded by our company. Because of her recent popularity, we arranged for her to put on several charity performances in Chicago." Miss Wilson noticed Kevin's tone of voice and asked him if Flo had done something to tick him off. "Not only did she insult me, but she was rude to my wife and her good friends. Our rising star absolutely ruined their weekend. I don't think there's a place for someone like her in our organization going forward. She's not a good ambassador for our brand. I think you know what to do." When Kevin finished speaking with her, he hung up his phone and put it back in his pocket. "Kevin, do you need me to?" Rachel didn't finish what she was saying, but he knew what she meant. "I don't think so," Lily said in a low voice. She knew that Rachel was very famous, but after all, it wasn't like Kevin was in charge of the entertainment industry. "Don't worry, Lily. I'll straighten things out for Nicole." Kevin comforted her as he squeezed her hand gently. Then he turned to Flo Lambeau and said, "This is your last chance. Are you going to apologize to her or not?" "Are you high or something?" Flo Lambeau replied smoothly as she flared her nostrils. Chuck kept his mouth shut the whole time. He didn't know which of them he should help. If he accidentally said something wrong, his entire family might suffer for it financially. "Well, I guess you've sealed your fate." Kevin shook his head incredulously. All the onlookers were sure that Kevin was bluffing. After all, how could this young guy dressed in rags have any power to affect the great Flo Lambeau? They all laughed at him like he was some kind of fool. While they were laughing and mocking Kevin, the lights in the mall began to dim as if there was a sudden power failure. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Was it a coincidence? Flo Lambeau's eyes suddenly grew wider. Whenever she performed, it was in her contract for the venue to ensure that there wouldn't be any equipment failures. There was only one explanation for the sudden power failure. Kevin's phone call had actually had an effect, and that effect was enormous. "Go out and find out what's going on, right now," Chuck excitedly yelled at the security guards and other staff members around him. Then Flo Lambeau's assistant ran up to her in a hurry. "Ma'am, your phone." Looking at the flustered expression on her assistant's face, Flo immediately realized that something had definitely gone wrong. "This is Flo. What can I do for you, sir?" Flo was extra nervous and extremely polite when she got on the phone. "What the heck have you been doing?" Lewis Kennedy yelled into the phone. Everybody could hear his voice blaring out of the earpiece. "I'm putting on a charity show in Chicago, but I've been dealing with a bunch of troublemakers. One of them looks like a real bum and he just threatened to get even with me. Now the power's gone out and the staff is looking into it." Flo tried her best to explain without making herself look bad. "You're a real spoiled brat," Kennedy growled at her. "Do you know who you just offended?" "Why? Is there something wrong?" Flo asked doubtfully. Since her last 2 films had done so well, Flo was already the most famous star in her studio, and Kennedy was usually pretty friendly with her. But today he was being very cruel to her. "Do you think I'd call if we didn't have a problem?" Kennedy gritted his teeth and sneered. "I got a call from Williams Media. They said that you just offended the president of their company and that your tactless attitude towards the president's wife and sister has seriously affected our business relationship. They're going to cut us off completely. What the hell have you done?" "I have no idea what I did. I didn't even know I met the president of Williams Media." Flo was absolutely gobsmacked. "You imbecile! They said you just insulted him backstage." Kennedy was about to throw his phone across the room. "Do you realize that the 2 films you just put out and all your commercial ventures for the next 3 years have been planned by Williams Media? As long as President Williams isn't happy, you'll be out of the entertainment industry for good." "Sir, I really didn't see Mr. Williams. I've only talked with the staff, and I had a few words with some annoying guy who came here looking for a photo op with his wife and friends." Flo was about to cry. Her whole future was going down the drain, and she had no idea why. Flo Lambeau, are you really that dense? That's not just some autograph hound. The president of Williams Media is standing right in front of you. You're frickin' unbelievable. Louis Kennedy took a deep breath and told her very slowly and clearly, if you don't ask Mr. Williams for forgiveness right this second, don't bother coming back to my company. After her boss hung up, Flo thought she was going to faint. And when she saw the smirk on Kevin's face, she felt her heart sink. Why would the president of a major company be dressed like a slob? He didn't even have a bodyguard. How was I supposed to know? Flo thought to herself. Let's head back to the apartment, Kevin, Nicole said again. She was trying to act like it was no big deal, but she was really disappointed. Lily pulled on Kevin's arm and said, Let's go, honey. Don't put Rachel in an awkward position. And remember that Dalton isn't here to help you if you get in a fight. She thought that there'd just been a power failure and Kevin had actually called Dalton to help him out. When Kevin was about to leave, Flo Lambeau suddenly called out, Mr. Williams, I was wrong. Rachel and Kevin were the only ones who weren't confused by this. So you admit that you were wrong. Don't you want me to get down on my knees and beg you? Isn't that how you put it? Kevin sneered as he threw her insult back at her. When Kevin said that, Flo's legs got weak and she almost fell over. I know I was wrong, really, really wrong. Please accept my apologies. I won't do anything like this again. By now, Flo's face had turned pale. But Kevin didn't say anything. He didn't even change his expression. Miss Lambeau, what are you doing? I've already called the power company and they've sent someone to deal with it, Chuck said as he trotted over to them. But Flo didn't pay any attention to him. As everyone looked on in shock, she dropped to her knees and started sobbing into Kevin's shirt. Please forgive me, she practically whispered as she thought about losing her contract with Williams Media. The onlookers were amazed and wondered if they were seeing things. What the heck was going on? What have you done to Miss Lambeau, you jerk? Chuck yelled at Kevin. Suddenly, his cell phone rang. When he looked at the screen, he saw that it was his father, Elliot Nassau. Dad, why are you calling me all of a sudden? Chuck quickly picked up the call and asked. I had to call you so the whole family wouldn't be ruined by you. Do you know what you've done? Elliot barked at him. Dad, are you talking about the power outage at the show? Don't worry, I've got it dealt with, Chuck explained with a smile. Are you kidding? I'm calling you because of Flo Lambeau, Elliot said angrily. Do you know that you've just insulted the president of Williams Media? What? No, I didn't, Dad. Chuck was stunned. Yes, you did. The president's secretary at Williams Media just called me in person. I don't want to hear any excuses. If the president doesn't forgive you today, you son of a bitch, you're out of the business. We do 60% of our contracts with Williams. Do you have any idea how angry I am right now? Elliot ended the call before his son had a chance to reply. Chuck wasn't a fool. He'd figured out his father was talking about Kevin. He just wished he'd realized it sooner, like when Rachel was standing up for Kevin earlier. But Chuck knew exactly what he had to do. He took a deep breath and groveled, just like Flo had done. I'm sorry that I offended you, Mr. Williams. Can you forgive me? Everyone stood there in silence. They were starting to realize just how powerful Kevin really was. And he obviously wasn't the useless loser that they'd heard rumors about. I'll have to think about it, Kevin answered him coolly. I had no idea who you were. Please forgive my ignorance, Chuck pleaded with him. This day had turned into a disaster. I'll have a chat with your family, Kevin responded as he turned and looked at Flo. Miss Lambeau, what do you have to say for yourself? Sir, as long as you're willing to forgive me, I'll do anything you ask me to do, she begged him very sincerely. It's good to hear that, Kevin replied casually, but he wasn't quite done teaching her a lesson.
Flo Lambeau and Chuck Nassau had just begged Kevin to forgive their rudeness after finding out he was the CEO of Williams Media. Flo's career as a star was just taking off and she couldn't let it all come crashing down. What's the use of apologizing to me? It's not like I'm the one who wanted to take pictures with you anyway. Kevin only wanted to teach Flo Lambeau a lesson. He didn't want to completely destroy her. After all, the company had already invested a lot in her career. Flo Lambeau instantly understood what Kevin meant. She quickly ran over to Nicole and took her by the hand. "I'm so sorry. I was being really impulsive earlier and kind of lost control. I apologize, and I hope that you can somehow forgive me." Seeing Flo's change of heart, Nicole felt a whole lot better. But for a moment she didn't know what to say and hesitated a little, which Flo misunderstood as a rejection. "I'll tell you what. You can be like my adopted sister. In the future, if you need anything at all, just send me a message and I'll do my best to help you out." Flo took out her phone and quickly exchanged numbers with Nicole. She also posed for a few photos with Lily. This made the fans who were crowded around them very jealous. Being able to get close to their idol was something they'd only dreamed of. After doing all these things to make up for her behavior, Flo stepped away from Nicole, who still hadn't recovered from the excitement, and returned to Kevin. In her most pleasant tone, she asked him, "Kevin, Mr. Williams, are you satisfied?" "I'm not satisfied." Kevin shook his head and replied. "Then what do you think we should do?" Flo lowered her head and asked him. She decided that if she made Kevin forgive her, she'd even be willing to spend the night with him. But Kevin didn't have anything like that in mind. A mocking expression appeared on his face. "Didn't you just say that you came to Chicago to meet with your fans? Well, I don't want to keep you from doing that. From now on, if anyone enters this mall, you need to take a photo with them. I'll ask someone to keep an eye on you from the control room. If you miss even one of them, you'll have to bear the consequences." Then Kevin turned to look at Chuck Nassau. He walked up to him and patted his shoulder. "Sometimes you end up backing the wrong team. Be more careful next time." Without waiting for Chuck to answer, Kevin quickly turned around and left the shopping mall with Lily, Rachel, and Nicole. The fans still hadn't gotten over their shock. Flo's eyes were welling up with tears. There were so many people in the shopping mall. How many photos would she have to take? But since Kevin had already given the order, she didn't have any choice, did she? Even her boss, Mr. Kennedy, couldn't argue with the CEO of Williams Media. All of this was the result of her foolish behavior. After walking out of the mall, Rachel said goodbye to the three of them. Kevin urged them to get going while things were still calm. After all, Flo had a huge fan base. If something went wrong, someone would have to clean up the mess. Nicole finally came back to her senses and gave Kevin an uneasy look. "You've definitely changed. Even someone as famous as Flo Lambeau has to suck up to you?" "Well, I had to make something of myself, didn't I?" Kevin proudly turned his head and looked at Lily while he replied. "I didn't expect Dalton to be so tough. He must have a lot of friends at Williams Media." Lily didn't think that Flo Lambeau's apology was all because of Kevin. Dalton may not have a lot going for him, but he has one heck of a reputation in Chicago. Kevin saw a way to delay telling Lily his secret identity. "Thank you so much, Kevin." Nicole kissed him on the forehead. "Nicole, what are you doing?" Lily asked in surprise. "What's wrong, sis? Are you jealous because I just kissed your husband?" Nicole said with a faint smile. "I'm not jealous. It's just that there are so many people around." Lily's face was as red as an apple. "Okay, you guys, let's change the subject. Anyway, it's still early. Do you want to go for a walk?" Kevin was feeling really good about himself. Lily and Nicole readily agreed. The three of them spent the rest of the afternoon shopping. The mall had a lot of good restaurants, so they also got a bite to eat. Kevin's job was to follow them around carrying all of the shopping bags. Then they went to a movie. It was a very long day, and when they got back to the condo, Dorothy had already gone to bed. Kevin threw all the bags on the sofa and plopped down in exhaustion. "I'm really tired after walking around for the whole afternoon. Lily, let's go take a nice hot shower." Nicole teased. "Kevin, do you want to join us?" "Really?" Kevin suddenly became a little more energetic. But the next second, he clearly felt Lily's eyes burning a hole right through him. She snapped, "What do you think the answer to that is, honey?" "I think we'd better forget about that idea. You two go ahead and clean up. I'm pretty tired right now." Kevin pretended that it didn't bother him and buried his face in the sofa. A few minutes later, Kevin heard the sound of the two women joking and splashing around in the bathroom. He couldn't help turning his head to look at them. The bathroom door was made of frosted glass. Although he couldn't see any details, he could still see enough to make his imagination run wild. He could make out the outlines of both of their figures and started to feel a little short of breath. Nicole playfully reached out her hand to rub Lily's breast with the sponge, which made her squeal in surprise. When Kevin heard her, he was tempted to rush in. "Nicole, just what are you doing?" Lily blushed shyly. "Lily, you've been married to Kevin for more than 3 years, right? What's going on between you?" Nicole gave her a lewd smile. Kevin and I haven't done anything yet." You could see the pain in Lily's eyes. Things had been going a lot better lately in their marriage, but Lily's heart was filled with sadness when she thought about how many times she'd given Kevin the cold shoulder. "What? You've been married for 3 years and haven't consummated your marriage yet? Then how did you spend your wedding night?" Nicole asked in surprise. "Our relatives and some other guests got him drunk," Lily answered quietly. But there was more to the story that she didn't tell her cousin. When they got married, Lily didn't have any feelings towards Kevin. You could even say she hated him, so on the wedding night, when he was dead drunk, she dragged him into the bathroom, and he spent the whole night sleeping in the tub. "Well, at least you're keeping in shape. What's your secret?" Nicole looked at Lily's figure and asked, "Can you give me any tips?" "What are you talking about?" Lily didn't know why she would ask her a question like that. As Nicole was about to explain, the bar of soap fell out of her hand and she yelled, "Oops! Help!" 3 seconds later, Kevin pushed open the bathroom door. "What's wrong?" They all stared at each other for a moment, and then things got really awkward. Lily instinctively cried out in shock. Kevin was petrified and didn't know what to do. You can imagine his surprise as he saw the two of them standing there naked in the shower. His heart skipped a beat and he stammered, I thought I heard..." "What are you looking at? Hurry up and get out." As Lily said this, she grabbed a towel and covered herself in a panic. Nicole burst out laughing. "Well, I guess we're even now." How could Kevin still think about bickering with Nicole? He hurriedly closed the bathroom door and headed back to sit down on the living room sofa. While he was recovering from the excitement, his phone suddenly rang. It was Professor Murdoch. "I wonder how she reacted to the pills," Kevin wondered as he picked up the phone. "Hello, Professor Murdoch. Have you had a chance to rest?" Kevin asked her casually. "Not yet, but I'm calling about something else." She took a sip of her coffee and explained. "There will be a very important meeting next Monday." "What do you mean by important?" Kevin inquired curiously. "This afternoon, the Myriads abducted the leaders of the top 10 organizations. Roger Knott was behind it all. They're planning on shaking things up among the younger members and putting the most evil groups in their place." Professor Murdoch gave the details as she understood them. Kevin frowned slightly when he heard this. "What does this have to do with me?" "What do you think? The School for the Healing Arts is going to have a contest. Whoever wins is going to have to kill Roger Knott. Your development has already reached an extraordinary level. I'm very optimistic that you'll win the contest and handle the problem," Professor Murdoch said with certainty. "Doesn't the school have any regard for human life?" Kevin was unwilling to be involved in this plan. "Our mission is to destroy evil and promote what is good. Roger Knott is the ranking member of the Myriads. I don't know how many disasters he's caused. If I can get rid of him, the entire world will benefit. When the time comes, you must perform your duty well." Professor Murdoch finished her inspirational speech and hung up the phone. Kevin sat there on the sofa with a big frown on his face. He was actually a member of the Myriads, and the deputy sect leader considered him a brother. Not to mention, he was Mackenzie's grandfather. Kevin had to find a way to save Roger Knott's life. The problem was that there were a lot of experts in the school, and the ones who had offices in the library were especially lethal. Even if Kevin wanted to attack them, he was willing but not able. "It seems like I really have to enter the contest." Kevin made up his mind to do what he thought was right. Moments later, Lily and Nicole stepped out of the bathroom drying their hair. "How you doing, Kevin? Did you like what you saw?" Nicole teased. She didn't seem to mind that Kevin had just seen her in the buff. "What do you think I saw?" Kevin replied awkwardly. "Stop it, you two. Let's just drop the subject." Lily stopped Kevin from saying anything else. She was still feeling kind of embarrassed. "You two go ahead and hang out. I'm going to the study." Kevin got up from the sofa to head upstairs. "Hey, I didn't know you were so shy," Nicole loudly teased. "Make sure you study hard," and she emphasized the word, hard. Kevin almost slipped and rolled down the stairs, but he couldn't argue with her. Heaven knew how much Nicole would tease him about it later. The room suddenly became quiet. Lily had apparently recovered from the awkward scene in the shower and stood there silently drying her hair. Nicole broke the silence. "Lily, what happened to you? Did my joke make you feel uncomfortable?" "It's not because of you, Nicole. I was just thinking about how things are going between Kevin and me," Lily replied in a low voice. Nicole wasn't a dope and quickly understood what was on Lily's mind. "Aunt Dorothy still hasn't accepted Kevin, has she?" Nicole asked her very directly. "Kevin's got more ambition than he did before, and he knows a lot of famous and influential people. But for some reason, whenever he's with Mom, he acts like a loser," Lily explained with a worried look on her face. "And you know what kind of person my mom is. I really don't know how to make them get along with each other." She looked Nicole in the eye and said very seriously, "One is my mother, and the other is my husband. I can't lose either of them." Nicole got serious and rolled her eyes. "It's simple. You and Kevin should have a baby. If Aunt Dorothy becomes a grandmother, she definitely won't dislike Kevin anymore." "But how can it be so easy to have a child? I haven't even slept in the same bed as Kevin for more than a month." Lily knew that Nicole wasn't joking around like she usually did. "Just take it one step at a time. The night is still young. Why don't we go out?" As expected, Nicole was feeling a little restless. "Where would we go in the middle of the night?" Lily said as she put down her towel. "How about a nightclub?" Nicole suggested excitedly. "Forget it." Lily didn't even want to think about it. She'd never liked going to places like bars and dance clubs, especially after that incident with Nolan Hill. She wasn't even thrilled about hotels. But Nicole's friends called her the nightclub queen when they were younger. After arguing back and forth, Lily finally relented and went up to the study to ask Kevin if he wanted to go with them. As they drove along in Kevin's Porsche Panamera, Kevin complained playfully, "I can't keep up with you two. You just showered and now you want to head out to a nightclub? Why not? Don't you have fun anymore?" Then Nicole looked around at the car's luxurious interior and exclaimed, "So tell me, Kevin, are you rich now? This car is a hoot." "It was a gift from Kevin's boss. He also gave him a Pagani Roadster, but that's just for the two of us," Lily explained as they whizzed through traffic. "That's one hell of a cool boss." Nicole was even more surprised and joked, "What company is that, Kevin? Are they hiring?" "Are you sure you'd want to work for us?" Kevin asked casually. However, he realized that Nicole might actually be a good fit at Williams Media. If he assigned her to Miss Wilson, she might really be successful in the entertainment industry. "Oh, I'm not interested in working," Nicole replied before Kevin could say anything. "But I'm really interested in your boss. Is he married?" Lily laughed out loud. "What are you laughing about, you stinker? Don't you think I've still got a good figure?" Nicole ran her hands along her hips. "Don't worry, Kevin. When I'm in charge of your company, I'll make sure you get to keep your job. After all, we're family." Nicole acted like it was a done deal. Kevin controlled his laughter and answered, "Fine, fine. I'll take you to my office tomorrow and introduce you to my boss's secretary." He turned his attention back to the snarled traffic on Michigan Avenue as he wondered if this was a good idea after all. As Kevin drove Lily and Nicole to a nightclub, they were discussing the possibility of Nicole getting a job at Williams Media. "That depends on whether you have what it takes." After Kevin said that, he kept out of the rest of the conversation and focused on his driving. Even this late in the evening, traffic was a nightmare downtown. About half an hour later, the three of them walked into the club. They were immediately overwhelmed by the intense music. There was a woman in the middle of the dance floor gyrating like nobody was watching. The place was a real meat market. Kevin noticed a couple sitting in a dark corner and wondered what they were up to. He pointed to an empty spot not far away from them and loudly said to Lily and Nicole, "You two go over there and sit down. I'll go to the bar and get us some drinks." "Go for it, Kevin." Nicole smiled and pulled Lily along as she walked towards the empty seats. "When are we leaving, Nicole? This place is too noisy, and I'm not used to it." Lily's face didn't look too good. "Don't worry, sis. There's a reason you're ready to leave. You're out of practice. Let's just hang out for an hour." Nicole smiled and teased. "Why are you in such a hurry to go back? Are you and Kevin going to make love?" "Nicole, would you please stop teasing me all the time?" Lily blushed again as she thought about what had just happened in the shower. Just then, a tough-looking man suddenly walked over and put his beer on the table. He leered at Lily and Nicole.
"Do you want to find a quiet place and get to know each other?"
"Why don't we just skip to goodbye? If you know what's good for you, you'll hurry up and leave." Nicole had a bad temper sometimes.
"Hey, babe, don't be so harsh. We don't know each other yet, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends."
The man had no intention of leaving. Instead, he grabbed a chair and sat down. "I'm sorry, but that seat's taken. You'll have to sit somewhere else," Lily said very coldly.
"Why don't we have a drink and get to know each other?" The man gave Lily a creepy look, and he practically had drool coming out of the corner of his mouth.
His name was Smitty, and he had a reputation for hitting on anything with a pulse. He'd been having a lot of bad luck that evening and was about to go to another club when Lily and Nicole caught his eye. "I don't know how to drink, so why don't you just move along?" Lily's expression was getting colder and colder.
"Don't treat me like that. Everybody can use a new friend."
He stuck out his tongue and reached his hand out towards Lily's cheek. Suddenly, a thick and powerful palm grabbed Smitty's wrist. "Don't you understand what she's saying? It's time to move along," Kevin said coldly.
"Who the hell are you?"
Smitty was really pissed to be interrupted like this. "You don't need to know who I am. Just leave now while you still have your health." As Kevin said this, he exerted a little more force on the guy's wrist. The expression on the man's face changed drastically, and he gave Kevin a ferocious sneer.
"Hey, friend, first come, first serve. I saw her first, and you're cutting the line."
He pulled his arm hard, trying to break free from Kevin's hold. But he was surprised to find that no matter how hard he tried, it didn't work. Kevin's hand was gripping him like a vice. "Well, I'm her husband. Why would I need to cut in line?" Kevin sneered as he suddenly let go of the man's wrist. When he opened his hand, Smitty fell to the floor because Kevin sometimes forgot his own strength. This kind of confrontation wasn't unusual for the nightclub. Since the two of them hadn't started a fight yet, they didn't attract much attention. When the onlookers saw that there wasn't much going on, they turned right around and went back to their dancing. "Get lost," Kevin finally shouted. Smitty jumped up from the floor and pointed at Kevin.
"Wait and see what I do to you, kid."
"I hate people pointing at me and talking crap. Get lost or you'll lose that finger." Kevin turned around and sat down, hoping that the guy would get the message and go bother someone else. Then he gestured to the server to bring their drinks over. Smitty gave Kevin a particularly nasty look. Then he walked out of the club and pulled out his cell phone to make a call. "Wow, Kevin, that was awesome. That guy even let you be a knight in shining armor saving a damsel in distress." Nicole took a sip of her drink. "He's just some petty local hoodlum. What's so amazing about it?" Kevin wasn't about to brag about what he'd done. He was a lot stronger than Smitty. "Hubby, I think we should just head home. That guy didn't look like someone to be trifled with," Lily said worriedly. "Don't worry, honey. If anything happens, I'll give Dalton a call. There's no tough guy bigger than him in all of Chicago." Kevin was trying to ease Lily's mind, but he wasn't joking. That was a fact.
Kevin, I know you have a good relationship with Dalton because you saved his wife's life, but you can't keep calling him up for everything.
Not only did Lily feel even worse now, but she was also worried about hurting Kevin's friendship.
Stop it, guys. We're here to have fun, not get a lecture.
Nicole admired her cousin, but she was being a real drag. Sure enough, Lily dropped the subject and just quietly sipped her drink. About 10 minutes later, there was a big commotion at the door, and they saw a dozen tall, sturdy men with knives in their hands and vicious looks in their eyes. Everyone in the nightclub stopped what they were doing. They didn't know where these people came from or what they wanted to do. Kevin, who had sharp eyes, could see the guy who'd just been giving them trouble. The manager of the club walked up to the men with a disarming smile. "Is anything wrong, Smitty? You look unhappy about something." "Get the hell away from me. I'm looking for someone. Everyone, just go back to what you were doing. Don't get involved if it's none of your damn business." He sounded even more proud and arrogant now than he'd been in front of Kevin just a few minutes before. Then he spotted Kevin still sitting in the same spot with Lily and Nicole. He swaggered over with a dozen bullies. "Kid, I'll give you one more chance. You're going to get down on your knees and apologize to me. Then I'll show these two women a really good time tonight. If you do that, we'll call it good." He sneered at Kevin, then he took a knife from the man next to him and drove it hard into the table in front of them. "If you don't do what I say, I'll cut off your finger and toss it into that fish tank over there." Lily's face went pale in an instant, and she hugged Kevin's arm tightly. Nicole, on the other hand, didn't panic at all. "Who are you trying to scare anyway? Don't you even know this man's name?" The group of thugs was stunned for a second. They really didn't know who Kevin was and started to have some doubts. Could he be the toughest man in Chicago? Or maybe he belongs to a powerful family? Smitty and the others thought to themselves. After all, Chicago was a huge city. You could spend your whole life without crossing paths with someone more powerful than you. Smitty came back to his senses and opened up his fist. He pointed at himself and said arrogantly, "Well, do you know who I am?" "I really don't know." Kevin smiled and shook his head. "And I really don't care either." There was no sign of fear on his face. "My name is Smitty. Have you ever heard of Dalton Steele? He's my brother-in-law," Smitty said confidently. "So now, smartass, you're going to apologize to me. If you don't, my buddies here will pound the crap out of you." Kevin got a funny look on his face when he heard Smitty say this. Who would have guessed? This jerk actually turned out to be Dalton's brother-in-law. "My name's Kevin Williams. It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of me, but you better call Dalton before you make another move." Kevin leaned back in his chair and put his feet up on the table. This was going to get interesting. Moments later, Lily and Nicole stepped out of the bathroom drying their hair. "How you doing, Kevin? Did you like what you saw?" Nicole teased. She didn't seem to mind that Kevin had just seen her in the buff. "What do you think I saw?" Kevin replied awkwardly.
"Stop it, you two. Let's just drop the subject."
Lily stopped Kevin from saying anything else. She was still feeling kind of embarrassed. "You two go ahead and hang out. I'm going to the study." Kevin got up from the sofa to head upstairs.
"Hey, I didn't know you were so shy," Nicole loudly teased. "Make sure you study hard," and she emphasized the word, hard.
Kevin almost slipped and rolled down the stairs, but he couldn't argue with her. Heaven knew how much Nicole would tease him about it later. The room suddenly became quiet. Lily had apparently recovered from the awkward scene in the shower and stood there silently drying her hair. Nicole broke the silence.
"Lily, what happened to you? Did my joke make you feel uncomfortable?" "It's not because of you, Nicole. I was just thinking about how things are going between Kevin and me," Lily replied in a low voice.
Nicole wasn't a dope and quickly understood what was on Lily's mind.
"Aunt Dorothy still hasn't accepted Kevin, has she?" Nicole asked her very directly. "Kevin's got more ambition than he did before, and he knows a lot of famous and influential people. But for some reason, whenever he's with Mom, he acts like a loser. Lily explained with a worried look on her face. And you know what kind of person my mom is. I really don't know how to make them get along with each other. She looked Nicole in the eye and said very seriously, one is my mother, and the other is my husband. I can't lose either of them. Nicole got serious and rolled her eyes. It's simple. You and Kevin should have a baby. If Aunt Dorothy becomes a grandmother, she definitely won't dislike Kevin anymore. But how can it be so easy to have a child? I haven't even slept in the same bed as Kevin for more than a month. Lily knew that Nicole wasn't joking around like she usually did. Just take it one step at a time. The night is still young. Why don't we go out? As expected, Nicole was feeling a little restless. Where would we go in the middle of the night? Lily said as she put down her towel. How about a nightclub? Nicole suggested excitedly. Forget it. Lily didn't even want to think about it. She'd never liked going to places like bars and dance clubs, especially after that incident with Nolan Hill. She wasn't even thrilled about hotels. But Nicole's friends called her the nightclub queen when they were younger. After arguing back and forth, Lily finally relented and went up to the study to ask Kevin if he wanted to go with them. As they drove along in Kevin's Porsche Panamera, Kevin complained playfully. I can't keep up with you two. You just showered and now you want to head out to a nightclub? Why not? Don't you have fun anymore? Then Nicole looked around at the car's luxurious interior and exclaimed, So tell me, Kevin, are you rich now? This car is a hoot. It was a gift from Kevin's boss. He also gave him a Pagani Roadster, but that's just for the two of us, Lily explained as they whizzed through traffic. That's one hell of a cool boss. Nicole was even more surprised and joked. What company is that, Kevin? Are they hiring? Are you sure you'd want to work for us? Kevin asked casually. However, he realized that Nicole might actually be a good fit at Williams Media. If he assigned her to Miss Wilson, she might really be successful in the entertainment industry. Oh, I'm not interested in working, Nicole replied before Kevin could say anything. But I'm really interested in your boss. Is he married? Lily laughed out loud. What are you laughing about, you stinker? Don't you think I've still got a good figure? Nicole ran her hands along her hips. Don't worry, Kevin. When I'm in charge of your company, I'll make sure you get to keep your job. After all, we're family. Nicole acted like it was a done deal. Kevin controlled his laughter and answered, Fine. I'll take you to my office tomorrow and introduce you to my boss's secretary. He turned his attention back to the snarled traffic on Michigan Avenue as he wondered if this was a good idea after all. As Kevin drove Lily and Nicole to a nightclub, they were discussing the possibility of Nicole getting a job at Williams Media. That depends on whether you have what it takes. After Kevin said that, he kept out of the rest of the conversation and focused on his driving. Even this late in the evening, traffic was a nightmare downtown. About half an hour later, the three of them walked into the club. They were immediately overwhelmed by the intense music. There was a woman in the middle of the dance floor gyrating like nobody was watching. The place was a real meat market. Kevin noticed a couple sitting in a dark corner and wondered what they were up to. He pointed to an empty spot not far away from them and loudly said to Lily and Nicole, You two go over there and sit down. I'll go to the bar and get us some drinks. Go for it, Kevin. Nicole smiled and pulled Lily along as she walked towards the empty seats. When are we leaving, Nicole? This place is too noisy, and I'm not used to it. Lily's face didn't look too good. Don't worry, sis. There's a reason you're ready to leave. You're out of practice. Let's just hang out for an hour. Nicole smiled and teased. Why are you in such a hurry to go back? Are you and Kevin going to make love? Nicole, would you please stop teasing me all the time? Lily blushed again as she thought about what had just happened in the shower. Just then, a tough-looking man suddenly walked over and put his beer on the table. He leered at Lily and Nicole. Do you want to find a quiet place and get to know each other? Why don't we just skip to goodbye? If you know what's good for you, you'll hurry up and leave. Nicole had a bad temper sometimes.
Hey, babe, don't be so harsh. We don't know each other yet, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends.
The man had no intention of leaving. Instead, he grabbed a chair and sat down. I'm sorry, but that seat's taken. You'll have to sit somewhere else, Lily said very coldly.
Why don't we have a drink and get to know each other?
The man gave Lily a creepy look, and he practically had drool coming out of the corner of his mouth. His name was Smitty, and he had a reputation for hitting on anything with a pulse. He'd been having a lot of bad luck that evening and was about to go to another club when Lily and Nicole caught his eye. I don't know how to drink, so why don't you just move along? Lily's expression was getting colder and colder.
Don't treat me like that. Everybody can use a new friend.
He stuck out his tongue and reached his hand out towards Lily's cheek. Suddenly, a thick and powerful palm grabbed Smitty's wrist. Don't you understand what she's saying? It's time to move along, Kevin said coldly.
Who the hell are you?
Smitty was really pissed to be interrupted like this. You don't need to know who I am. Just leave now while you still have your health. As Kevin said this, he exerted a little more force on the guy's wrist. The expression on the man's face changed drastically, and he gave Kevin a ferocious sneer.
Hey, friend. First come, first serve. I saw her first, and you're cutting the line.
He pulled his arm hard, trying to break free from Kevin's hold. But he was surprised to find that no matter how hard he tried, it didn't work. Kevin's hand was gripping him like a vice. Well, I'm her husband. Why would I need to cut in line? Kevin sneered as he suddenly let go of the man's wrist. When he opened his hand, Smitty fell to the floor because Kevin sometimes forgot his own strength. This kind of confrontation wasn't unusual for the nightclub. Since the two of them hadn't started a fight yet, they didn't attract much attention. When the onlookers saw that there wasn't much going on, they turned right around and went back to their dancing. Get lost, Kevin finally shouted. Smitty jumped up from the floor and pointed at Kevin.
Wait and see what I do to you, kid.
I hate people pointing at me and talking crap. Get lost or you'll lose that finger. Kevin turned around and sat down, hoping that the guy would get the message and go bother someone else. Then he gestured to the server to bring their drinks over. Smitty gave Kevin a particularly nasty look. Then he walked out of the club and pulled out his cell phone to make a call. Wow, Kevin, that was awesome. That guy even let you be a knight in shining armor saving a damsel in distress. Nicole took a sip of her drink. He's just some petty local hoodlum. What's so amazing about it? Kevin wasn't about to brag about what he'd done. He was a lot stronger than Smitty. Hubby, I think we should just head home. That guy didn't look like someone to be trifled with, Lily said worriedly. Don't worry, honey. If anything happens, I'll give Dalton a call. There's no tough guy bigger than him in all of Chicago. Kevin was trying to ease Lily's mind, but he wasn't joking. That was a fact. Kevin, I know you have a good relationship with Dalton because you saved his wife's life, but you can't keep calling him up for everything. Not only did Lily feel even worse now, but she was also worried about hurting Kevin's friendship. Stop it, guys. We're here to have fun, not get a lecture. Nicole admired her cousin, but she was being a real drag. Sure enough, Lily dropped the subject and just quietly sipped her drink. About 10 minutes later, there was a big commotion at the door, and they saw a dozen tall, sturdy men with knives in their hands and vicious looks in their eyes. Everyone in the nightclub stopped what they were doing. They didn't know where these people came from or what they wanted to do. Kevin, who had sharp eyes, could see the guy who'd just been giving them trouble. The manager of the club walked up to the men with a disarming smile.
Is anything wrong, Smitty? You look unhappy about something. Get the hell away from me. I'm looking for someone. Everyone, just go back to what you were doing. Don't get involved if it's none of your damn business.
He sounded even more proud and arrogant now than he'd been in front of Kevin just a few minutes before. Then he spotted Kevin still sitting in the same spot with Lily and Nicole. He swaggered over with a dozen bullies.
Kid, I'll give you one more chance. You're going to get down on your knees and apologize to me. Then I'll show these two women a really good time tonight. If you do that, we'll call it good."
He sneered at Kevin, then he took a knife from the man next to him and drove it hard into the table in front of them.
"If you don't do what I say, I'll cut off your finger and toss it into that fish tank over there."
Lily's face went pale in an instant, and she hugged Kevin's arm tightly. Nicole, on the other hand, didn't panic at all. "Who are you trying to scare anyway? Don't you even know this man's name?" The group of thugs was stunned for a second. They really didn't know who Kevin was and started to have some doubts.
Could he be the toughest man in Chicago?
Or maybe he belongs to a powerful family, Smitty and the others thought to themselves. After all, Chicago was a huge city. You could spend your whole life without crossing paths with someone more powerful than you. Smitty came back to his senses and opened up his fist. He pointed at himself and said arrogantly,
"Well, do you know who I am?"
"I really don't know." Kevin smiled and shook his head. "And I really don't care either." There was no sign of fear on his face.
"My name is Smitty. Have you ever heard of Dalton Steele? He's my brother-in-law,"
Smitty said confidently.
"So now, smartass, you're going to apologize to me. If you don't, my buddies here will pound the crap out of you."
Kevin got a funny look on his face when he heard Smitty say this. Who would have guessed? This jerk actually turned out to be Dalton's brother-in-law. "My name's Kevin Williams. It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of me, but you better call Dalton before you make another move." Kevin leaned back in his chair and put his feet up on the table. This was going to get interesting.
"Kevin, if you wanted to have a night out and go for a drink, why didn't you just come and find me? I know a lot of better places than this."
Dalton walked up to Kevin enthusiastically and put his arm around his shoulder.
"You didn't have to beat up my brother-in-law so badly."
"In my defense, he went after my wife and her cousin, so I had to put him in his place. Besides, out of respect for you, I only kicked him once. At least he's not lying on the ground like his other men," Kevin said with a laugh.
"Fair enough. My brother-in-law can be quite a headache sometimes. I'll have to explain this to my wife when I get home."
Then Dalton turned around to Smitty and shouted,
"Don't you know who you just pissed off? What the hell are you just standing there for? Apologize to Mr. Williams immediately."
Smitty's jaw dropped. With no choice but to accept defeat, he dejectedly made his way towards Kevin and apologized.
"Mr. Williams, I'm so sorry for giving you any trouble tonight. Please forgive me."
Kevin picked up the wine bottle that he'd ordered earlier and poured a glass in front of Smitty. "I accept your apology. Now that we're good, have some of this wine. I hope you've learned your lesson and will keep a low profile when you go out in the future." Displeased with Smitty's behavior, Dalton scolded him.
"Why are you still standing there drinking? Leave the nightclub as soon as you finish that glass of wine."
He then ordered his bodyguard to take away the men who were lying on the floor. Once Smitty and his men were out of the nightclub, Dalton turned his attention back to Kevin.
"Even our teacher at the Healing Art School is no match compared to someone like you, Kevin. It's better to keep you safe and sound than anything else."
The surrounding crowd seemed to have been confused by Dalton's words. What was he talking about? Is this man even human? After a while, Kevin felt that they couldn't stay at the nightclub much longer, so he gave his car keys to Lily and let her and Nicole head back first. He was going to walk with Dalton for a while. "Promise me you'll come home early," Lily reminded Kevin quietly.
"Don't worry, Lily. I won't let Kevin get in any trouble," Dalton answered with a smile. Not long after Lily and Nicole left, Kevin felt a wave of pressure coming towards him and Dalton. His expression changed drastically. "Dalton, run!" He pulled Dalton by his arm and called for everyone at the nightclub to escape. "Everyone, get out immediately! Don't follow the two of us!" "What are those two running away from?" The onlookers were confused. Suddenly, Kevin saw a dagger swiftly approaching them from a distance. "Dalton, be careful!" After pushing Dalton away, he quickly gathered all of his strength and stretched out both hands in an attempt to deflect the weapon. But the dagger's momentum was too strong, and Kevin was sent flying from the impact. He hit a tree hard, making him spit out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, the deflected dagger was perfectly caught by none other than Ariana Titus.
Damn it! You really won't stop going after us, will you?
Dalton's face instantly turned sour when he saw who was attacking them. I can't believe you're still alive after what I did to you. Ariana sneered as she looked at Dalton in surprise.
Of course, I'm tougher than you think,
Dalton remarked and then rushed towards Kevin.
Are you all right?
I'm fine. Kevin reassured Dalton and got back up on his feet. As he took out the night dagger from his jacket, he briefly wondered how Ariana had suddenly resurfaced to attack them tonight. Since they were able to track their whereabouts, it meant that there must be people from the Union in the city. You two are doomed. Both of you will die tonight, Ariana threatened.
You really talk about a big game, don't you? I remember back in New York City, you also said the same thing at the hospital, but you didn't succeed.
Dalton was unimpressed.
Now that you're in my territory here in Chicago, what makes tonight any different?
Dalton, just bear with it. She definitely won't stand a chance against the two of us. Kevin remained relatively calm at the moment. Kevin, you scum! Tonight I'll end both of your lives as payback for Randall Williams. 2 souls in exchange for his. As soon as these words left Ariana's mouth, she took a step forward and started to thrust her dagger at Kevin.
Good luck with that. Maybe it's you who should join him up there.
Dalton didn't have any fear as he raised both fists, ready to fight Ariana. The two of them collided with each other. Unfortunately, Ariana was too strong for Dalton, and his legs sank deep into the ground from the impact. You all right there, Dalton? Kevin wanted to come over and help him, but he was still recovering from the effects of crashing into the tree.
I'm fine,
Dalton moaned, but Kevin could see some blood flowing down from the corner of his mouth as he gritted his teeth. You bastard! It's time for you to die! Ariana shouted as she once again diverted her attack towards Kevin. Seeing this, Dalton wanted to stop Ariana, but he couldn't manage to pull his legs out of the ground. Fortunately, Kevin instinctively blocked her dagger attack, sending it flying into the air as it bounced off of his arm, thanks to the protective clothing the Alliance leader had given him. It saved his life again. Damn it! Because her attack had failed, Ariana decided to change her strategy. She withdrew her dagger and used all of her might to strike Kevin's chest with her left palm. This time, Kevin was unable to block her, and he went flying into another tree. But his protective clothing managed to protect him from much worse injuries. I didn't expect you to be wearing such powerful protection under your clothes. When I'm finished with you, I'll take it from you as my bounty. Ariana sneered as she rushed towards Kevin in a flash. He could see the greed that was faintly visible in her eyes. Kevin wanted to reply, but when he opened his mouth, all he could do was spit out some blood as he tried to recover. When you see your grandfather in the afterlife, remember to get down on your knees and apologize to him for being such a useless grandson. Ariana taunted as she prepared to deliver a final blow to Kevin's head.
Don't hurt him.
Dalton finally found enough strength to pull his legs out and rush to save Kevin. You're courting death by overestimating yourself. Neither of you are powerful enough to go up against me. Ariana warned as she struck back. She hit Dalton in the chest, rendering him unconscious in an instant as he fell to the ground. Dalton! Kevin shouted anxiously. It seemed like it was impossible for them to fight back, even with his night dagger and his body armor. Any last words? Ariana snarled as she clenched her fist. Just then, a strong wind blew, forcing Ariana to divert her attention and defend herself as she held her dagger in front of her. Suddenly, another dagger swiftly struck hers. With her dagger's blade now bent, she was forced to throw it away. However, even before she could draw another dagger from her vest, she received a powerful blow to the stomach, sending her a few steps back. She spat out some blood as her entire body trembled. Who dares to interfere? Ariana quickly wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her gaze vigilantly swept around her surroundings a few times, but she still couldn't see her mysterious opponent. "Why are you still hiding? Show yourself!" "How can the Union claim to hate evil when you're just adding to it?" A figure slowly walked over from a dark corner. "It's you again!" Ariana immediately recognized who it was. She then drew another dagger and pointed it at the Night King. "You've injured my student twice. It seems like I have to teach you a lesson." The Night King drew his own dagger, the same one that had struck Ariana earlier. Seeing this, Ariana wasn't going to back down and was prepared for a showdown. She brought out the shield that was strapped behind her back. Forged in titanium alloy, she was confident that it would protect her from the Night King's strikes. However, her shield was shattered into pieces like broken glass with just one strike, and the impact sent her a couple of feet back. With blood coming out from her mouth and nose, Ariana's eyes were filled with disbelief. What kind of dagger was the Night King using? It looked much more powerful and terrifying than hers. "This is only a small punishment. If you ever dare to harm Kevin again, you'll suffer the same fate as your shield." The Night King warned Ariana without even looking at her as she ran away. "Thank God you came. I feel bad, though, that you've already had to save me twice despite your training," Kevin called out with difficulty. "It's all right. It doesn't hurt to lose now and then. I still have a lot to teach you," the Night King stoically replied. "Thank you so much. I really appreciate it." No matter how thick-skinned Kevin was, it was impossible for him to hide his emotions after the Night King had saved his life twice. "That woman is too ruthless. She really wants you dead. Fortunately, I got here in time," the Night King commented as he took a multicolored pill from his pocket. "This is a crystal pill. Take it and you'll wake up recovered. I'll go and check on your friend." After the Night King threw the pill to Kevin, he stood up and walked towards Dalton. When the Night King first got there, he watched them secretly for a long time. He wanted to see how far Kevin could go against Ariana during their second encounter. So he'd witnessed Dalton risking his life to save Kevin, and this impressed him. More than an hour later, Kevin woke up from a deep sleep. When he checked his surroundings, the Night King had already disappeared. Only Dalton, who was recuperating not far away, and the traces of their fight on the ground proved that it wasn't just a dream. "I didn't expect the Night King to give me the crystal pill," Kevin exclaimed as he examined how his body felt. According to the herbal medicine books he got from the Alliance, the crystal pill was made from high-grade natural ingredients that only a selected few in the organization knew how to produce. And true enough, his injuries had not only fully healed, but he also felt much stronger than before because of it. While he was thinking about this, Dalton suddenly woke up.
"Kevin, are you all right?"
"I'm fine, Dalton. Why don't we head home? We can't stay here for long," Kevin cautioned with lingering fear that Ariana would come back for them when the Night King is out of sight. Dalton was curious.
"The old man from earlier."
"That's my mentor. I can't say much, but you must keep his existence a secret," Kevin interrupted Dalton. But he didn't tell him anything else about his connection with the Night King. After all, the fewer people who knew about him, the better.
"I understand, Kevin. Let's head back now."
Seeing that Dalton had already fully recovered, Kevin knew right away what the Night King had given him. The next day, when Kevin took Lily to the Healing Arts School, he was surprised to find that there were various arenas set up on the school's martial arts field. "Honey, I've got class now. Let's meet this afternoon." Lily smiled and kissed Kevin before leaving. "Okay," Kevin agreed as they parted ways. However, as soon as Kevin stepped into the classroom, he saw Mackenzie, who was sitting next to Penny. He then remembered that he still had to think of a way to save her grandfather, Roger Knott. Very quickly, news of a martial arts competition to eliminate the myriads quickly spread throughout the entire school. Professor Murdoch entered each classroom and explained the rules of the contest. They were very simple. Students would fight each other one-on-one. They couldn't use hidden weapons, nor could they injure or kill their opponents. The winners of each round would move forward to face one another in the same manner, and the final victor would have an opportunity to kill Roger Knott. Thus, the entire student body marched onto the field in an orderly manner, and high-ranking leaders from the top 10 organizations were already sitting on the platform. I wonder if they'll also participate in today's competition, Kevin asked nervously. His chances of winning would be almost zero against these martial arts experts. Don't worry, they're just here to observe, and their main purpose is to select potential leaders from the current student body, Professor Murdoch explained. However, you'll still have to prove yourself against representatives from the other organizations. Professor Murdoch, are you sure I can handle them? This is a lot of pressure. Kevin was nervous. Professor Murdoch shook her head and gave Kevin a stern look. You better make this school proud. If you don't get first place, Don't worry. I was just kidding. Of course I'll give my best. Kevin interrupted before going to his seat beside Dalton. Upon doing so, he noticed that Mackenzie was sitting in front of him. You're not a student here, are you? Kevin asked her. I brought Mackenzie. Penny turned her head and explained. At the same time, she gave Kevin a complicated look. You're participating in the competition later, right? How did you know? Kevin was surprised. Each class has a nominated roster of participants determined by our professors. Didn't you read our chat group thread last night? Professor Murdoch told everyone that she was counting on you to win, Penny patiently explained. Kevin and Dalton subconsciously looked at each other when they heard her. Last night, the two of them almost died at Ariana's hands. How could they have had the time and energy to check their phones?